Ling Han's figure moved quickly. He traversed through the ley lines, and in a short while, he had arrived at the location of the hidden ley lines. Ling Han was surprised. Previously, he had only felt that this ley line was hidden, but when he came closer to take a look, he discovered that this ley line had actually suffered a massive impact and had suffered a serious injury. That was why it was so undetectable. Curiousness rose up in him. He wanted to know how this ley line had been severely injured, so he traveled along this ley line. However, this ley line was heavily damaged, like a dead blood vessel. It was filled with congested blood, and it was extremely difficult to travel. Planets also had life. The ley lines were equivalent to blood vessels, and now that the ley line was injured, it was filled with the trash produced by the planet. They were all poisonous substances, and were greatly harmful to cultivators. The logical course of action was naturally to retreat. If the ley line was damaged, so be it. What did it have to do with him? However, Ling Han was extremely curious. He activated the starlight screen and continued to advance. So what if it was slower? There would eventually be an end to it. This path was really difficult to travel. Ling Han frowned. The ley line was filled with poisonous substances, and it was as if they had formed a swamp, making every step extremely difficult for him. There were a few times that he had the thought of retreating, but that was only an instant. With his firm willpower, how could he give up so easily after having made his decision? After traveling for a whole day, Ling Han finally arrived at the end of the ley lines after having traveled for about 10,000 kilometers. In the outside world, with Ling Han's current speed of over 100 times the speed of sound, this would only take a short while, but it was different here. It was too difficult to travel, and he actually spent a day and night. Thankfully, he had finally reached the end. Ling Han observed and saw that the ley line was already at its end, but there was actually a small hole at the end. This should have been pierced through by a small thing. Ling Han couldn't help but think, could it be that it was this thing that pierced through this ley line and caused it serious injury? He began to dig up dirt and rocks, and continued onwards through this hole. 30 meters, 300 meters, 3,000 meters. Ling Han ventured deeper, but he discovered that this hole was still there. He still hadn't reached the end. This power was a little fierce. Ling Han was even more curious. At that time, who had thrown that thing and smashed it onto neighboring planet? Not only had it pierced through a ley line, but he had actually not reached the end yet? I refused to believe this. Once Ling Han's curiosity was piqued, even 9 bulls wouldn't be able to pull him back. He continued to advance, and with the boost of strong power, it wasn't as easy as walking on flat land here, but it was not all that difficult either. After walking for a few more hours, he was almost at the core of the planet. Finally, he found the culprit that had penetrated this hole. This was a piece of fur? Ling Han's heart suddenly thumped against his chest. Could it be that this was... He stretched out a hand and picked up that piece of fur. Then, he unfolded it, and a familiar seal instantly came into view. Destructive Energy Spirit Diagram. The third part. Ling Han faltered for a moment before bursting into laughter. Who would have thought that he had only come to snatch the bride, and would actually be able to obtain a corner of the Destructive Energy Spirit Diagram? If it was not for the fact that he did not want to leave behind any internal demons, and deliberately made a trip, he probably would not have come to neighboring planet in this lifetime, right? Furthermore, if it was not for the fact that he was too curious, and wanted to get to the bottom of this damaged ley line after discovering it, how could he have possibly obtained this spirit diagram? 1 sip and 1 peck. Could it be that the heavens had decided one? Could it be that this was the effect of the true dragon of fortune that he had obtained? Really, the whole process could only be described as luck. A series of coincidences that had nothing to do with intelligence. Whatever, the most important thing was the result. Ling Han turned around. This time, he naturally wouldn't take the original path. He would first head to the nearest ley line, then wrap himself in earth chi. He instantly appeared beside the large black dog and the others. How is it? Did you discover anything? The large black dog asked. Ling Han smiled. A very big discovery. What is it? The large black dog asked. Confidential. Fuck. The large black dog and little azure dragon raised their middle fingers at the same time. Ling Han didn't mind. He didn't immediately begin to study the newly obtained spirit diagram of destructive energy, but rather continued to study formations. Ling, you're screwing me over. Tang Yunar's voice rang out from the connection device. What did I do to you? Ling Han asked, smiling. This planet is under martial law, and warships are only allowed to enter and not exit. Even if I enter, I can't possibly take you guys away, Tang Yunar said. Tell me, did you screw me over and make me come for nothing? Ling Han smiled and said, All right, I'll treat you to some candy when we get back. How about it? Che, do you think I'm a child? Tang Yunar said with a humph. However, she immediately said, You also have to give me 2 celestial medicines above 3 stars. Why don't you go just commit robbery while you are at it? Heh, I'm here to rob you. What do you say? All right, I'll have to trouble you this time. 2 celestial medicines and that's it, Ling Han said with a smile. They have to be at least 3 stars, Tang Yunar emphasized. This little girl was really not easy to fool. Sure, at least 3 stars. Ling Han nodded. Only then was Tang Yunar satisfied. She stood guard at the periphery of neighboring planet, and if the situation became critical, she would rush over to save them and see if she could forcefully escape. How is it? The large black dog approached and asked. The shuttle has entered, but we can't leave. Thus, it's up to us now, Ling Han said. The large black dog couldn't help but feel gloomy. However, it wasn't difficult to guess the idea of using a shuttle to escape. If they really entered the sky and was intercepted by the Mao clan and Song clan, then Ling Han wouldn't be able to use the star steps and would really be trapped. At that time, aside from using the heavenly Tao flames contained inside the Primal Chaos Extreme Lightning Tower, there would definitely be no other way. And just like that, another month later, Ling Han was filled with confidence and said, Come, let's go to where the transfer formation is. Ling Han used the star steps to bring the 3 people to the transfer formation. Of course, there was a long distance between them, and if they continued forward, they probably wouldn't be able to hide from the elites stationed here. They were sect master-level elites and could easily suppress the 4 of them in an instant. However, at such a far distance, Ling Han couldn't see anything even if he activated his eye technique. It didn't matter. He used the Void Beast hide to go and observed from a closer location. However, he didn't dare to take the risk of charging into the transfer formation. The sect master was watching from the sidelines. He was completely capable of capturing Ling Han before the transfer formation activated. 2 days later, Ling Han felt that it was about time and retreated. He had long since bought the materials to build the transfer formation. Now, he only needed to carve formation patterns on it. After a mere 4 days, Ling Han completed the formation foundations, because he didn't need to use his brain. He only needed to copy it. Of course, if he wasn't a formations grandmaster, he wouldn't even be qualified to copy them. I'm going to activate the transfer formation, Ling Han said. He threw a large amount of Tao stones into the formation. This was the energy needed to activate the transfer formation. The large black dog looked at Ling Han doubtfully. Little Han, is this reliable? That's right. Grandpa Dragon is also worried that this won't send us into some dangerous place. The little azure dragon's expression was also filled with doubt. Cut the crap and get in. Ling Han kicked the little azure dragon and the large black dog into the transfer formation one by one. Meanwhile, Song Lan had a kind of blind trust in him, and had long since walked in on her own. Ling Han also entered the transfer formation himself. With a thought, a white light swept past, and the 4 of them instantly disappeared. The formation foundations of this transfer formation also exploded into pieces. This was a one-time thing in the first place, and Ling Han had no plans to let the Song clan and Mao clan catch up to him, trapping him again. Xiao. The 4 of them had already appeared on another planet, not far from neighboring planet. However, they had ultimately exited neighboring planet. The 4 of them were all overjoyed, and hurriedly began another teleportation. This was still within the territory of the Song clan and Mao clan, so it could not be considered safe. After a few more teleportations, they had already left this galaxy far behind, and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Ling Han informed Tang Yuner that they could retreat, and it was inevitable that the little girl would grumble again. Then, after they rested for a while, they continued their journey. Right until their bodies could no longer bear it, did they stop to rest. Meanwhile, Ling Han began to study the third triangle of the destructive energy spirit diagram. Theoretically speaking, even saints wouldn't be able to comprehend the true meaning of destructive energy, much less him. This was something that was transcendent above 9-star energy. However, Ling Han possessed millions and millions of dimensions inside his body, and they actually had a mysterious resonance with the destructive energy. This allowed him to easily cultivate this paramount energy. It was just like how he knew it by nature, but it had been too long and he had forgotten about it. He could only awaken his memories through the spirit diagram of destructive energy. In a mere 2 days, he had completely mastered this corner of the spirit diagram. With a shake of his fists, destructive energy appeared, which was a total of 3 times larger than before. With a thought from Ling Han, he focused all of the destructive energy on his right hand. Then he threw a punch and instantly a pitch-black ball of light shot out. Pung, pung, pung. It surged past, and nothing was indestructible, easily blasting a hole into the mountain range ahead of him. Then, it continued to shoot up into the sky, right until its power was exhausted. Only then did it disintegrate and return to the heaven and earth. Hiss, how terrifying. Thankfully, he had not used it in the inn. Otherwise, who knew how many innocent people would be implicated? Ling Han broke into a grin. After obtaining the third triangle of the spirit diagram, the destructive energy was finally strong enough, and could be used as a single-person attack. In the past, this could only adhere to mystical power, strengthening the destructive power of mystical power, but now it was finally strong enough to be used as a single-person attack. Pure destructive energy, just how shocking was its destructive power? Ling Han believed that if his opponent didn't dodge and instead took it head-on, then even the true self-tier shield would be unable to withstand a single blow from destructive energy. In other words, the true self-tier cultivator could completely be killed by him. All right, I finally have another ability to oppose the true self-tier, and I don't have to depend on the environment of the heaven and earth. Ling Han nodded. Although the earth dragon was strong, it was still limited by the environment. For example, in the true dragon abyss, he couldn't mobilize the ley lines. If my cultivation level advances further, and I advance my body art and mystical power to the peak stage of the consummate level, will my power advance into the level of the true self-tier? Even if I can't mobilize the regulations of heaven and earth, the destructive energy is more than enough to compensate. Haha, I'm really looking forward to it. Ling Han did not stay idle. He began to study the heavenly Tao flames in the primal chaos extreme lightning tower. Previously, he had only extracted a rudimentary form, but as his cultivation level increased, the power of the heavenly Tao flames was somewhat unable to keep up. Thus, he wanted to try extracting another portion of the regulations to strengthen the heavenly Tao flames. This was a path that no one was guiding, so it was extremely difficult for Ling Han to walk it. His improvement was minimal. A month later, they returned to Nine Suns' Holy Land. Senior Brother Ling is mighty. Senior Brother Ling is so domineering. When they found out that Ling Han had returned, a great many disciples ran out, pulling banners and raising great flags to warmly welcome him. TSK, to fly into a rage for the sake of a lover, snatching the bride and seizing the beauty. In the eyes of these young and hot-blooded people who looked down on rules, it was undoubtedly an extreme individual heroism, which had deeply struck their hearts. Many people didn't dare to. There were too many restrictions, and now that they saw another person walk out bravely and challenge authority, it naturally attracted their resonance and even worship. Moreover, Ling Han was freakishly freakish in the first place, so who wouldn't revere him? Meanwhile, Song Lan was incredibly embarrassed. The fact that she had been snatched away by Ling Han had already spread throughout the whole world. In future, it would be impossible for her not to marry Ling Han even if she did not want to. However, not only did this not make her feel annoyed or angry, she was instead filled with anticipation. Ling Han didn't have any self-awareness at all. He had saved her so that he wouldn't leave behind any internal demons. Now that he had brought her back to the Nine Suns' holy land, he naturally left without a second thought. It wasn't long before the news of Ling Han bringing the beauty back spread throughout the galaxy network. The Nine Suns' holy land didn't issue a gag order. Moreover, they were the Holy Land, so did they need to be wary of a Venerate tier-level force? This caused the Mao clan and the Song clan to become the biggest joke. With a Venerate tier elite standing guard, they actually allowed a few core formation tier cultivators to escape. Wasn't that embarrassing? Let me tell you guys, it's actually not that the Venerate tier from the Song clan is incompetent, but that he deliberately let them go. Why? You don't understand. The Song clan and the Mao clan are archenemies. The reason why Fairy Song and Trash Mao married was completely for the sake of alliance through marriage. Now that Song Lan has been snatched by Ling Han, if the Mao clan can tolerate this, how would they be able to face others in future? If they can't, then wouldn't they be seeking their own demise by going against the Nine Suns' holy land? Oh, so that's how it is. Hiss, then the Song clan is really ruthless. This move is poisonous. Hee. Let's just watch the show. At some point in time, another conspiracy theory had popped up on the Galaxy Network, causing the precarious relationship between the Mao clan and the Song clan to become even worse. Ling Han, someone wants to challenge you. On this day, Ling Han was studying the heavenly Tao flames when a disciple ran over and delivered a piece of news to him. Since Ling Han defeated the Imperial Sun, there were actually quite a number of people who had come to challenge Ling Han. They were all here to become famous with a single battle, and as time passed, Ling Han naturally would not take it to heart. Who is it? He asked casually. Mao Yuntian. The disciple revealed a strange smile. Was he here to catch the adulterer? Ling Han gave an "oh," but wasn't surprised, because the news that he had brought Song Lan back to the Nine Suns' holy land had already spread to the Galaxy Network. When the Mao clan found out, they would definitely react. However, what Ling Han didn't expect was that Mao Yuntian would come so quickly. From the moment he returned to the Nine Suns planet, it had only been 7 days. And it must have been a Venerate tier from the Mao clan that had moved and brought Mao Yuntian with him. Otherwise, it could not have possibly been so fast. Ling Han thought for a moment, then stood up and said, "Since he is here, let's meet." He was not the type to be afraid of trouble. Furthermore, this matter also needed to be resolved. Ling Han walked out, and when the news spread out, instantly, a great many disciples rushed out, fighting to catch a glimpse of the excitement. This so-called jealousy over a woman was the most fun. Ling Han walked outside the Nine Suns' holy land and saw that Mao Yuntian was indeed standing there. His face was livid, and his expression was extremely ugly. If it was anyone else, they would feel as uncomfortable as if they had eaten a fly. Fuck, their newlywed wife had been snatched by a man. Several months had already passed. Had he gotten sick from playing around with her? The moment he thought of this scene, Mao Yuntian felt an urge to commit murder. This despicable guy was only in the core formation tier, and he actually kidnapped her right in front of him. Just how humiliating was that? Ling Han, hurry up and hand her over. When he saw Ling Han, Mao Yuntian's already livid face turned even worse, as if there was a grassy plain above his head. Now that he had met his enemy, his eyes were bloodshot with envy. This damn adulterer. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "You're truly childish. If I wanted to hand her over, why would I have gone to snatch her in the first place? Moreover, Junior Sister Song has arms and legs, and she's a free person. She has her own ideas about where she wants to go. So what are you asking me for? Ling Han, you have the guts to snatch the bride, but don't have the guts to admit it?" Mao Yuntian roared in fury. Ling Han waved a hand dismissively. "Do I need you to judge whether I have guts or not?" Hearing these words, the disciples of the Nine Suns' holy land all laughed loudly. That's right, Ling Han had guts. Was there any need for Mao Yuntian to judge that? He had crippled an imperial son, and he still had no guts? Mao Yuntian was shaking with anger, his hands tightly clenched into fists. He wore a baleful expression as he looked at Ling Han and said, "Ling Han, I want to duel with you." You're a major tier higher than me, and you're also 100 years older than me. How can you have the face to duel with me? Ling Han couldn't help but laugh in spite of himself. This was definitely an unjust battle. No one would agree to this. Humph. I indeed wouldn't bully you like this, but you snatched my beloved wife and provoked me first, so you have to bear the consequences. Mao Yuntian shouted loudly. Ling Han, do you dare or not? Right at this moment, another voice rang out and said, Old brothers of the Nine Suns' Holy Land, it was your brat who provoked the Mao clan first. No matter what, you have to give an explanation for this matter. This voice boomed, carrying a frightening might. A venerate tier elite. Obviously, this was that ancestor of the Mao clan. Not only had he brought Mao Yuntian over, he was also exerting pressure on Nine Suns' Holy Land. However, Mao Yuntian was right. It was indeed Ling Han who had provoked him first. He had snatched his wife, so what need was there to talk about a fair battle? You should have thought of this kind of consequences when you were snatching the bride. Ling Han pondered for a moment, before saying, Fine, I'll duel with you. He had grasped the star steps, and by nature he was already invincible. Moreover, the Earth Dragon and destructive energy could pose a threat to true self-tier elites. Thus, it wasn't that he couldn't fight back. A cruel expression appeared on Mao Yuntian's face. This time, he was going to crush Ling Han into dust and destroy him completely. Come battle! He strode out. Ling Han crossed his arms behind his back, taking his time. This is the standard posture for showing off. Learn from it. The large black dog said to the little azure dragon. This was called teaching on the spot. The little azure dragon nodded repeatedly. Though he was awesome, he had just been born, after all. There was still too much he had to learn. Ling Han, I have to say, you are truly freakish. Mao Yuntian began his opening remarks. Even the imperial sun has been crippled by you. You are practically heaven-defying. However, you are only a core formation tier after all. No matter how strong you are, you would not be able to match a single blow from me. You seem to have forgotten that I did not just block a single blow from you, Ling Han said with a smile. Heh, times change. Mao Yuntian shook his head and said, Do you think I'm unprepared after learning that you're a formations grandmaster? He waved his hand, and instantly, a jade bowl flew into the air. As it spun, it enlarged and only stopped when it had reached 50 kilometers in size. This jade bowl was turned upside down, and there were multiple waterfalls of light flowing down from it, with mysterious seals circulating around it. This is a ley line forbidding spirit tool, Mao Yuntian said proudly. It's also created by a formations grandmaster, capable of suppressing ley lines. Ling Han, do you still have any hopes of getting lucky? What? Ley line forbidding spirit tool? It's the spirit tool that seals the ley lines. It's over. If the ley lines are sealed, how would senior brother Ling be able to use formations? He can only depend on his own strength. However, if a core formation tier cultivator attacks a true self tier cultivator, won't he definitely lose? The disciples all shook their heads. Without a doubt, Ling Han would definitely suffer a great defeat. Of course, battling at their own doorstep, even if he was defeated, the elites of the Nine Suns' Holy Land would definitely not just sit by and watch as Ling Han was really beaten to death by Mao Yuntian. Ling Han was the hope of the Nine Suns' Holy Land. In future, he was destined to become a saint. Despairing, aren't you? Mao Yuntian laughed loudly, killing intent flickering in his eyes. This ley line sealing bowl could only last for about 10 minutes. After all, it was meant to seal off the ley lines of a planet, and what kind of existence were planets? This was especially the case with the Nine Suns planet, which was equivalent to a saint. It was only in a deep slumber. Thus, being able to seal off the ley lines for 10 minutes was already enough. It certainly wasn't long, but for a true self-tier cultivator to kill a core formation tier cultivator, wouldn't 10 minutes be enough? He knew that the Nine Suns' Holy Land wouldn't sit by and watch him kill Ling Han. So he wanted to take this chance to give Ling Han a good beating. The best scenario would be to cripple him. In a fair battle, after crippling him, it would not be appropriate for the Nine Suns' Holy Land to launch an attack. Just like how Ling Han had crippled Bailey Che, the Ziwei Imperial clan could only swallow this bitter fruit. Ling Han stimulated the ley lines, and as expected, it was as if the ley lines were asleep and could not be used at all. However, he sensitively discovered that the ley lines were slowly reviving and would recover not long after. This time was at most 10 minutes. Ling Han was confident in himself and said, "In my eyes, you can't be considered a match at all. If it wasn't for the fact that you are one major tier higher than me, I would be able to kill you with a single punch." Mao Yuntian was furious. This should have been him toying around with Ling Han, making Ling Han cry and beg for mercy. But now, why was this guy so stubborn? Fine, then let's beat him up first and see how he would still be able to laugh. "You're seeking death," he shouted loudly, and swept towards Ling Han. His figure spread out and he was like a golden rock. Golden light flickered, as fast as lightning. Ling Han smiled. Was this fast? He activated the imminent skyline, and with a turn of his body, he was actually not the slightest bit inferior. Saint-level movement technique. The Venerate tier elite from the Mao clan couldn't help but humph. There was a massive gulf between the Venerate tier and the Saint tier, and that was why Ling Han was no slower than Mao Yuntian even though he was clearly only at the core formation tier. Of course, most importantly, it was still Ling Han who was too freakish. His mystical power had soared all the way to 38 heavens, and that was why he could activate this kind of high speed. After dodging this attack, Ling Han immediately counterattacked with the black light of illusion. This was divine sense level. There was no trajectory of impact, and it could be reached with a single thought. Mao Yuntian was instantly hit. First, he was slightly confused. After all, he was in the true self tier, and had surpassed Ling Han by a major tier, so his resistance was naturally strong. However, he was still unable to break free from the illusion. Instead, he was immersed in it. He was not an imperial son, capable of being immune to all negative effects. Mao Yuntian was completely immersed in his own fantasy. In this illusion, he had already killed Ling Han and successfully snatched back the beauty. He had truly entered into his wedding night. All of a sudden, he was elated. Everyone could clearly see that this guy was showing an expression of ecstasy. His arms were crossed over his chest, and his behind was still nudging forwards. Fuck, he's hard. Fuck. This is too blinding. As he fought, he actually began to fantasize and directly became hard. What kind of person is this? Pervert. No one dared to believe that Mao Yuntian was actually shameless to this extent. Even if you are in the true self tier, and you can suppress Ling Han with one hand, it should not be to the extent that you would be so arrogant and forceful in front of everyone, right? And you are still pushing back and forth. This was too disgusting. Everyone was speechless. This had completely refreshed their worldview. Ling Han hadn't expected this either. He had only used the black light of illusion to drag out the time, but he hadn't expected that Mao Yuntian would reveal such an unbearable side of him. He shook his head. From now onwards, this prodigy from the Mao clan should have no face to see anyone again, right? Right at this moment, Mao Yuntian suddenly faltered, and clarity returned to his eyes. Heavens, what was he doing? He hurriedly lowered his hands, but his lower body was still sticking out. For the moment, it could not be appeased. He hardened his heart and directly bent it. All right, it was done. Ling Han! He spat out word by word, his eyes spitting fire. He didn't know why he was suddenly immersed in his fantasies and unable to free himself, but he could imagine that it was definitely Ling Han's doing. This despicable guy, what kind of great humiliation had he caused him? How would he be able to face others in future? Die! 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 He roared in fury and charged towards Ling Han. He delivered a series of palm strikes like tsunami waves, divine chains of order entwined around his body, and as he delivered a palm strike, endless seals lit up. This was the strength of a true self-tier elite, who had seen through the profound secrets of heaven and earth. He was definitely not someone that a core formation tier cultivator could match. Even if Ling Han had cultivated the Heavenly Dragon Emperor technique, and even if his physique was incredibly tough, if there was no need, he had absolutely no wish to face the attack of a true self-tier elite head-on. He retreated. Wang, the barrage of murderous aura surged out. Ah! Mao Yuntian immediately grabbed his head and screamed in agony. He looked like he was in extreme pain. It should be known that the strength of Ling Han's soul was comparable to spirit transformation tier. Though limited by his cultivation level, he could not unleash its full might. It was still enough to cause trouble for even the true self tier. Again. Wang, Wang, Wang. The murderous aura attacked him repeatedly. This was divine sense level, and it could ignore distance and reach him with a single thought. This naturally caused Mao Yuntian to suffer greatly. There were tears of blood flowing from his eyes, making him look extremely ferocious. Who could have imagined this? The dignified true self tier cultivator didn't even manage to touch the corner of the core formation tier cultivator's clothes, and he was actually injured to the point of crying tears of blood. Although no one knew what method Ling Han had used, it was definitely his doing. Mao Yuntian hurriedly stimulated high-level energy, forming a shield around him. He knew that the mystical power shield couldn't protect him. True enough, when the murderous aura attacked again, it was instantly intercepted by high-level energy, turning into a small black figure. However, it still overcame all obstacles and charged into Mao Yuntian's mind, making him feel as if his head was being pierced by needles, which was extremely painful. Hiss! This time, everyone could see clearly, and they were all stunned. It was clearly this tiny black figure that caused Mao Yuntian to shed tears of blood. But what kind of celestial technique was that? It had such terrifying destructive power that it could easily penetrate even high-level energy. Ling Han was also slightly surprised. That was because when he had been battling against the Imperial Sun previously, they had not been able to block the barrage of murderous aura either. It was only because they had the spirit tool personally forged by the Ancestral King that they were immune to all negative effects. That's right, the true self tier. Only this cultivation level could truly stimulate the regulations of heaven and earth, and everything was ultimately the use of regulations. Thus, Mao Yuntian was able to resist the barrage of murderous aura to a certain extent. Damn it! Damn it! Mao Yuntian was truly about to go crazy. He was a true self-tier cultivator, but he hadn't even made a single move, and Ling Han had already tormented him to such a miserable state. He had become hard and thrust his behind in public, and was even crying tears of blood. This was a complete joke. He charged over. Even if his head hurt from the barrage of murderous aura, he ignored it completely. He only had one thought now, and that was to kill Ling Han. Ling Han used the imminent skyline and retreated. The black light of illusion flashed again. Mao Yuntian was once again motionless. He was dumbfounded for a moment, then suddenly laughed loudly. That was because in the illusion, he had once again killed Ling Han. However, he was a true self-tier cultivator after all and had been hit once. He soon came back to his senses. Why you? He was wild with rage. He had been hit again. Everyone was also watching with twitching mouths. This was really a battle that had never been seen before. Not only had it overturned the fact that elites would definitely win, it was also incredibly laughable. Mao Yuntian was weeping tears of blood, but he was laughing like an idiot. This was very comical. Mao Yuntian no longer had any grand words to say. His eyes were bloodshot, and he continued to launch attacks at Ling Han. Hong, Hong, Hong. He was a true self-tier elite after all. He was too strong, and with every attack, the skies would be filled with brilliance. Ling Han unleashed the icy killing celestial finger, but even with the ice energy, he was still unable to withstand Mao Yuntian's attack. It was easily dispersed. There was a gap of a major tier between their cultivation levels. This kind of suppression was really enough to make one speechless. However, what he didn't know was that the spectators were really speechless. They had never seen such a core formation tier cultivator that could actually make a true self-tier cultivator look so battered and exhausted. In the distance, the expression of the venerate tier elite from the Mao clan was also livid. He knew that a great many people were streaming live on the Galaxy network, so Mao Yuntian had really made a fool of himself this time. He wanted nothing more than to kill both Ling Han and Mao Yuntian. Yet he was so calm that he didn't move a single muscle. Mao Yuntian made a move. It could be said that he had a legitimate reason for doing so. He was the person involved and the victim. Even if he was a major tier higher than Ling Han, he could still challenge Ling Han. However, it was different for him. He was a venerate, so how shameless could he be? Moreover, if he made a move, would the elites of Nine Suns Holy Land just sit by and watch? If they really summoned the Saint Tool, he would definitely be blasted into smithereens. Thus, he could only watch and anticipate Mao Yuntian could explode in power. However, Mao Yuntian's power still hadn't exploded yet. However, the time for the ley line sealing bowl to be effective was almost up. This bowl flew down from the skies and landed on the ground. When Mao Yuntian saw this, his expression instantly changed drastically. He knew how powerful the Earth Dragon was. 2 of them were enough to make him suffer. If that wasn't the case, how could Ling Han have kidnapped his bride right in front of his eyes? Now he had to face the Earth Dragon again. Do you miss it? Ling Han smiled faintly. With a flick of his finger, Hong, an Earth Dragon instantly appeared majestically, appearing behind him. Then it was the 2nd, the 3rd, the 10th. In any case, he had already exposed the number of 10 dragons before, so he did not mind exposing it again at all. Mao Yuntian only felt a bitter feeling, and a string of curses raced through his mind. Fuck. Could you be even more freakish? At this moment, Mao Yuntian was filled with utter despair. At most, he could only battle 2 Earth Dragons, but Ling Han summoned 10 Earth Dragons in a single go. If he went head-on, he would only be overturned by the Earth Dragons. Furthermore, Ling Han did not just possess the Earth Dragons. The barrage of murderous aura and the black light of illusion also tormented him greatly. If the 3 of them unleashed their might at the same time, he did not know how he would be able to withstand it. However, the mighty True Self tier cultivator was actually going to lose to a core formation tier cultivator? No. This guy was not only a core formation tier, but also a formations grandmaster. Losing to a formations grandmaster, it wasn't a humiliation. Mao Yuntian had already begun to find an excuse for himself. Couldn't be helped. Previously, he couldn't do anything to Ling Han, and now the latter had even summoned 10 Earth Dragons. No matter how he thought about it, there was no way he could win. It's my turn now, right? Ling Han said with a smile. The black light of illusion shot out, and Mao Yuntian immediately fell into the illusion. The 10 Earth Dragons danced in unison, charging towards Mao Yuntian. After being tormented by the black light of illusion so many times, Mao Yuntian naturally had a strong resistance. In an instant, he broke free, but right at this moment, 10 Earth Dragons also surrounded him. Fuck! Mao Yuntian drew out his spirit tool. It was a green staff, and as he swung it, pung, he was locked in a fierce battle with the Earth Dragons. After paying a considerable price, he finally destroyed the 10 Earth Dragons completely. He panted heavily, appearing to be extremely tired. Ling Han applauded and said, "Not bad. Not bad. Your abilities are gratifying. Let's do it again." Boom! Another 10 Earth Dragons shot out. After such a long time, it was enough for Ling Han to once again gather enough Earth Chi. Mao Yuntian wanted to cry. 10? Fuck, he could summon the Earth Dragons with just a snap of his fingers. But in his case, he was really clashing with them physically. The wear and tear of both sides were on 2 completely different levels. If he gave up, he wouldn't be able to defeat Ling Han at all. Of course, this was unless his strength reached a level where he could obliterate 10 Earth Dragons in one go. At that time, he could insta-kill Ling Han in a single go. He leaped back in retreat, completely losing the courage to continue fighting. Ling Han was disappointed and said, Why are you running? This is a duel. Duel your sister." Mao Yuntian didn't even turn around, and he had already arrived beside the Venerate tier elite from the Mao clan. No matter how harshly he was scolded, he wouldn't challenge Ling Han again. That would truly be seeking his own humiliation. As expected, the Venerate tier elite from the Mao clan gave him a slap, causing him to spin 3 times on the spot. However, the Venerate tier elite of the Mao clan also knew that Mao Yuntian really couldn't be blamed for this. Instead, it was Ling Han who was too freakish. It could even be said that it was his poor insight that had not seen that Ling Han actually knew spiritual attack. Otherwise, if he had prepared a few spiritual defense spirit tools for Mao Yuntian, instead of just a ley line forbidding spirit tool, the result would have been completely different. By now, what else could he say? Farewell. The venerate tier elite from the Mao clan grabbed Mao Yuntian, tore a rip into space and left. Staying to seek his own humiliation? The entire area was filled with the sounds of discussion. Who would have thought that when a true self-tier cultivator made a move on Ling Han, not only had he failed, he had even been beaten into fleeing in a sorry state. Not only here, but there was also a heated debate on the Galaxy network. In fact, there was even a question that had been raised: how could a true self-tier cultivator kill Ling Han? Firstly, you must have a spirit tool that can resist spiritual attacks. Secondly, your battle prowess is either enough to crush 10 earth dragons, or you have a spirit tool that can seal ley lines. Thirdly, you have to cultivate a saint-level movement technique. If you can't even catch up to him, what else can you say? There were many capable people, and it wasn't long before they came to 3 important conclusions. In fact, the assassins from the Battle God Palace was also involved. They used a verified account. This was the channel through which the Battle God Palace communicated with outsiders. If one wanted to find the Battle God Palace to carry out assassination, this account would be responsible for communicating. Previously, the various forces, including the imperial clans, had all protested or threatened the Chong clan and asked them to seal off the account of the Battle God Palace. But the Chong clan ignored them completely, ensuring fairness for everyone. This was the principle of the actions of the Chong clan's great emperor when he was alive, so the Chong clan would not change it either. Which also meant that no matter how evil a villain was, he would still be alive and kicking on the Galaxy network, and there was no need to worry that his hiding place would be leaked. This was off topic. In short, this was the first time that the Galaxy network had become so lively because they were discussing how to kill a core formation tier cultivator, and Ling Han could be considered to have set a new record. However, as the person involved, Ling Han didn't take it to heart at all. He was actively comprehending the heavenly Tao flames. If necessary, he wanted to go to the Black Moon planet and observe the heavenly Tao flames from a close distance. Additionally, he wanted to break through to the true self tier as soon as possible. At present, he was being targeted by too many people, and he had more or less revealed his trump cards. Once he advanced into the true self tier, his battle prowess would become unfathomable again. Furthermore, after he advanced into the true self tier, he would be able to obtain all the inheritances of ancient Sun Saint. Peace returned to the galaxy. In the short term, there weren't any major events that shook the world, but peaceful days were destined not to last long. Only 2 months had passed, and waves had once again risen on the Galaxy network. The Mountain Sea Heaven had reappeared. What was Mountain Sea Heaven? This was not a mystery realm, but rather a super-large city. However, it was not on any planet, but rather a city, floating alone in the galaxy. Every 90,000 years, the Mountain Sea Heaven would appear once, and it would last for a period of time. Then, the path would be cut off again, and it would be hidden in the universe once more. What was so amazing about this city? Here, regulations materialized, and the energy of heaven and earth was incredibly dense. Cultivating here was far superior to other places. Then was this a holy land for cultivating? In theory, yes, but in truth, very few prodigies would enter and cultivate to great accomplishment level before coming out again. Why? Because this city would only open once every 90,000 years, and there was a heavenly path through it. After the majority of people entered, they would not be able to make it back out at all. It should be known that venerate tier elites theoretically only had a lifespan of 100,000 years. Thus, what did it matter that he had cultivated to great accomplishment level in the Mountain Sea Heaven? He had not even had the chance to show off his might, and had already died of old age. Of course, for those great elites who were determined to break through to Saint Tier, the Mountain River Heaven was still an excellent choice. Every time it opened, a large number of sect masters and venerate tier elites would enter. When the next time it opened, a few saints would walk out, and the majority would die of old age within. Going by that theory, only elites would be interested in the Mountain Sea Heaven, right? No, young prodigies would also scramble madly for it. What was the reason for this? Then it would have to be said who had forged the Mountain Sea Heaven. the descending heaven holy emperor. Aside from when the heaven and earth first formed, the divine beasts coexisted, and after that, there would only be one great emperor in every era. As the saying went, great emperors would never meet each other, and it was hard to decide who was stronger. But even so, everyone was certain that the descending heaven holy emperor's abilities were enough to rank in the top 10 among all the great emperors in history, or even top 3 in fact, or top 1. That was because according to legends, when the descending heaven holy emperor achieved Tao, it was just in time for an incredibly dark era. Even the great emperor could possibly die, but the descending heaven holy emperor managed to forcefully pacify the darkness all by himself. And this mountain sea heaven was built by the descending heaven holy emperor. It contained the secret of his inheritance, the needless mountains. The descending heaven holy emperor's power was definitely not limited to mere legends. After him, every generation of great emperor would feel rueful and highly revered the descending heaven holy emperor, proclaiming him as one of the most powerful ancestral kings in history. Because he had spent his whole life pacifying the darkness, the descending heaven holy emperor didn't even have any descendants or heirs. All of his knowledge was buried in the needless mountains. However, no one knew where the needless mountains were. After so many generations, it was still a mystery. Thus, the only clue was the mountain sea heaven. This was the bridgehead that the descending heaven holy emperor had used for battle in the past. It was equivalent to a chariot. According to rumors, when the descending heaven holy emperor had died, he had once said that the needless mountains lay within the mountain sea heaven. Precisely because of this, every time the mountain sea heaven opened, there would be countless people surging in, searching for the secret of the needless mountains. Of course, aside from those great elites that were determined to become saints, the others would come out before the mountain sea heaven closed, to avoid being trapped for 90,000 years. If they did not become saints, they would basically not be able to survive until the next time the mountain sea heaven opened. Now, the heavenly path had appeared, opening the great path that led to the mountain sea heaven. Descending heaven holy emperor is amazingly awesome. Although he can't be claimed to be number 1 in history, he's definitely one of the strongest great emperors. The large black dog ran over. Little Han, when are we setting off? Ling Han chuckled and said, after so many years, not a single person has found any clues. Do you think we can succeed? That may not be the case. Who knows, we may be lucky? The large black dog said. True, just look at the inheritance of the 9 Sons Holy Land. No one had managed to find it for countless years, yet in the end, it was discovered by Ling Han. This was both due to strength and luck. The little azure dragon muttered, what descending heaven holy emperor? In front of my father, he can't even withstand a single blow. All right, Ling Han said with a smile. The true dragon is indeed the leader of the divine beasts, and has world-shaking abilities. However, he was created by heaven and earth after all, and there is no process of advancing step by step towards the peak. Thus, if all the great emperors can be revived, I still think that the ancestral kings of the future generations would be slightly more powerful. Grandpa Dog thinks so too. The large black dog nodded. Che, you guys are too ignorant. The little azure dragon naturally didn't agree. In his eyes, the true dragon had once been the leader of the divine beasts, and now it was undoubtedly an emperor among emperors. Then you can just stay and watch the house, Ling Han said with a smile. No, Grandpa Dragon also wants to join in on the excitement. The little azure dragon immediately objected. For such a grand event, as long as one could attend, they would not miss out on it. The entire galaxy network was discussing this matter, and some forces had even mobilized their entire clans. With more people, the possibility of finding the needless mountains would also be slightly higher. The 9 Sons Holy Land also fully mobilized. A total of 3 Venerate tier elites were mobilized, bringing all their disciples with them to the mountain sea heaven. And this time, 3 Venerate tier elites had gone, yet there would be 2 Venerate tier elites remaining there. That was because their lifespans were already running out, and they had to take a gamble in the mountain sea heaven. If they became saints, they would still be able to come out after 90,000 years. If they didn't become saints, then there was naturally no need to mention anything else. According to the Galaxy Network, There would be a great many super geniuses in the mountain sea heaven, the large black dog said. Ling Han also learned about the mountain sea heaven. He knew that this could be considered a super holy land, and was not the slightest bit inferior even when compared to imperial clans. Why? That was because a great many sect masters and venerate tier elites were trying to break through to saint tier inside. After failing, they were also dissatisfied with the fact that what they had learnt had been lost, and would search inside for natives to pass on their cultivation techniques. And if they became saints, they would also want to take in disciples in their boredom, or even give birth to a son or daughter. In these countless years, countless elites, just how many inheritances would be left behind? Thus, the mountain sea heaven could completely be called a super holy land. Sometimes, it could even produce imperial sun-level young prodigies, dazzling an era. Moreover, the regulations here were solidified, and the energy was dense. Cultivating them would be half the work, but twice the effect. Led by the 3 venerate tier elites, Ling Han and the others soon arrived outside the mountain sea heaven. In fact, even at this moment, they still couldn't see the super large city. However, an ancient path appeared in the galaxy. As long as they followed this path, they would be able to enter the mountain sea heaven. One after another, forces arrived. Some only had 3 to 4 people, or there were hundreds or thousands of them. Their scale was astonishing. After arriving here, no one deliberately provoked them. They all stepped onto the heavenly path and walked forwards. This path was astonishingly long, and as they walked, the stars shifted, and in the space of a single step, the stars were all left behind them. It was as if time was flying, and they were rapidly passing by. After walking for a day, a planet appeared in front of them. It was completely black in color, and was extraordinarily huge, and one could vaguely see the towering city walls on it. This was once a sun, the 9 mountains venerate said. However, it was shrunk countless times by the descending heaven holy emperor's great power. It solidified and transformed into something similar to an ordinary planet. However, the gravity fields on it are several thousand times stronger than ordinary planets, so you have to channel mystical power to resist at all times. Otherwise, you can only sprawl out on the ground like mud. Everyone was stunned. Just how terrifying were the flames of a sun. They were an existence that was equivalent to 8-star high-level energy. Even saints could only blast apart the sun, and could not come into contact with it for a long time. Only the ancestral king would have such great power, able to cool down and solidify the sun, shrinking it countless times over, which even allow others to set foot on it. The more they knew about the strength of the ancestral king, the more they would feel helplessness that they could not hope to reach his height. All right, let's go into the city, another venerate tier said. A massive city gate appeared ahead of them, as tall as 30,000 meters. Rather than calling it a city gate, it would be better to call it a pinnacle. Ling Han raised his head. No wonder the mountain sea heaven was called a super large city and not a planet. That was because this was indeed surrounded by the city walls, and the city walls were as tall as 30,000 meters. Every brick was exuding an ancient aura, and it could be seen that there were many places on the city walls that were damaged, leaving behind pits and holes. This had not been corroded by time, but had rather been left behind through battle. When they arrived at the city gates, some people were curious and went to bombard the city wall, but with a single blow, the city wall was completely unmoved, while they themselves flipped over a few times and fell heavily. This piqued the interest of many people, and they all stepped forward to test it out. In the end, no one could damage the bricks here. Ling Han also tried it. Ordinary attacks were completely ineffective, and even if he used destructive energy, he only managed to damage it slightly. To say nothing of you guys, even I would not be able to damage a single brick or stone here, a venerate tier elite said. What? Everyone was dumbfounded. Even venerate tier elites were unable to shake the city wall here? Ling Han was also stunned. Looking at the grooves left behind on the city wall, who had left them behind? A saint-level being. This was definitely a saint-level being. Just what had this ancient city experienced? After sighing here for a while, they finally entered into the city. An incredibly grand and majestic ancient city appeared in front of them. The mountain sea heaven was built on a sun that had been extinguished. Though this sun had been compressed countless times over, it was still no smaller than an ordinary planet. Furthermore, the mountain sea heaven had more or less occupied the entire sun. So it could be imagined just how colossal this city was. As far as the eye could see, there were mountains and rivers, waterfalls that hung down from the sky, and divine chains that shone like rainbows. Of course, the most direct display was that the moment they stepped into the city gates, a great many people gave a muffled humph and almost knelt down. The gravity field was too strong. Thankfully, everyone had been warned in advance. Thus, an instant later, they all spread out their mystical power shields to resist this kind of gravity field. Ling Han naturally walked as if he were walking on flat land, because he had cultivated the Heavenly Dragon Emperor technique. His body art was equivalent to his cultivation level, and this bit of gravity was practically child's play in his eyes. It should be known that a strand of his slightly disheveled hair was still sticking up, without the slightest sign of falling downwards. From this, it could be seen just how strong his physique was. Aside from him, the little azure dragon was also fearless, but the large black dog, Empress, and Hunyo were slightly inferior. They had to put up a shield of mystical power, because their grasp of the Heavenly Dragon Emperor technique wasn't deep enough, and none of them had cultivated the core formation tier chapter. However, Ling Han put up a mystical power shield and had the little azure dragon do the same. Why? The little azure dragon appeared baffled. Don't let others know that we are body arts practitioners. Ling Han communicated through divine sense. The little azure dragon instantly gave an, "Oh," and said in realization, "You're trying to trick people again, brat. Fuck. This is only a trump card. Okay? What do you mean by tricking people? Do you know how to speak?" Ling Han didn't lower himself to his level. It was fine as long as he knew that this four-legged snake had a bad mouth. The Nine Mountains Venerate stroked his beard and said, "If one cultivates in this environment for a long time, body art would be extremely powerful." That's right. The other two Venerate tier elites also nodded in deep agreement. Concurrently cultivating body art was actually the dream of quite a number of people. However, there were really too few people that were proficient in body art. Furthermore, the requirements for cultivating body art were too high, and required all sorts of precious medicinal ingredients to cultivate, which could easily overwhelm a large force. Of course, most importantly, there was no cultivation technique or corresponding environment. For example, this planet that had once been a sun had a terrifyingly large gravity field. It was a natural holy land for cultivating body art, and in any other place, even saints wouldn't be able to do so. Unfortunately, one can only stay here for 2 to 3 years at most, and there is absolutely no time to cultivate the body art. Nine Mountains Venerate shook his head as he looked at Ling Han with slight pity. He had a very high opinion of this disciple of his. If he could also cultivate body art, he would definitely be even stronger. Let's not talk about this. Let's find a good place first. The other two Venerate tier elites said. This time, they would both stay in the mountain sea heaven. They would either become saints or die. In the city, regulations materialized. The regulations that could only be discovered after exhausting one's spirit was laid out in front of them, and it was really too helpful for cultivating regulations, especially from the true self tier onwards. Cultivating the regulations here would really be half the work and double the effect. However, in different regions, the regulations manifested were different, and there was a difference in how many regulations there were. Hence, if they could occupy a good place, that naturally would be even more beneficial. They weren't the first batch of people to enter this space, but it didn't matter. In the cultivation world, there was no such thing as first come, first served. Instead, strength spoke louder than words. When a great many small forces saw them approach, they immediately gave up their territory, and only returned after they had left. There was no need to threaten them at all. Could it be that they were going to resist? That would really be the calamity of the destruction of their entire clan. After half a day, they found a place with mountains and waters. There were saint-level regulations manifested here, and they were like a rainbow that connected the heavens. For Venerate tier elites, this gave them a huge reference, and was extremely helpful in breaking through to Saint tier. However, this was only help. If their own comprehension ability and accumulation was not enough, they would still be unable to take that step. On their way here, Ling Han also saw a great many natives. A great many of them were like them, putting up a shield of mystical power. However, there were also some that were extremely tough, and could withstand such a terrifying weight of gravity with only their physical bodies. From this, it could be seen that their body art was definitely astonishing. Different people would create different paths. In this place, the natives adapted to the local conditions and created a cultivation technique, using gravity to temper their bodies, which was close to an instinct. Meanwhile, the true dragon started from itself and created the heavenly dragon emperor technique, using high-level energy to temper the body. The two paths were completely different, but in the end, they achieved the same effect. Body arts. All the techniques in the world referred to the great Tao. Ling Han nodded internally. The method was not important. What was important was the result. However, it was clear that the true dragon was awesome. The heavenly dragon emperor technique could be cultivated all the way to the end, and finally surpass the saint tier. It could even take on the imperial weapon head-on, and allow one to exchange a few blows with a great emperor. Though he was definitely no match, and if one cultivated the heavenly dragon emperor technique here, the true self tier, or at most the spirit transformation tier, would probably be the end. After all, there was only so much gravitational force here. Moreover, to cultivate the body art of spirit transformation tier level, he would probably have to enter into the interior of the planet, and use the even stronger gravity force there to temper his body. The outer regions was already not enough. Since he was already here, he couldn't waste it. Let's see what kind of help this gravity field could give him. Ling Han removed the mystical power shield, allowing gravity to take effect on him. However, his physique was already extremely powerful. Although gravity was astonishing, it couldn't even affect the flow of his blood. Sigh. Ling Han sighed. By the looks of it, he would have to enter the ground so that the gravity field would increase explosively. Only then would he be able to feel the pressure. He and the little azure dragon didn't need to temper their bodies, nor did they need to temper their cultivation level above sect master level. That was because even if they cultivated body art to the pinnacle here, they would only be spirit transformation tier level at most. For them, there was practically no improvement to their battle prowess, so what was the point of wasting so much effort? Moreover, the regulations here were solidified, and cultivation was the true way to go. If one were to study the body art, that would really be a loss of a greater gain. It would be extremely stupid. Ling Han was not idle either. He was observing those regulations. This was something that he would not be able to sense usually. Even if he had really advanced into the true self tier, he would still need to exert a lot of effort to be able to touch a sliver of it, and it was the lowest level at that. Unlike here, where even saint-level regulations would appear, as if they were within easy reach. Of course, no one would really touch it. This was regulations, the embodiment of the great Tao of heaven and earth. If one touched it without enough abilities, they would really be seeking death. Was there any high-level energy manifestation? Ling Han searched around, but unfortunately, there was none here, which disappointed him greatly. In these 2 days, he was walking around in the mountain sea heaven. It was said that the secret of needless mountains was buried here. Obtaining it corresponded to obtaining the treasure trove of a great emperor. Even Ling Han's heart throbbed wildly. Though he had cultivated a considerable number of imperial techniques, he still lacked an imperial scroll, and in the case of the imperial scroll, it was the foundation of an imperial clan. Bloodline? Bloodline could only allow an imperial clan member to explode for a short while. The imperial scroll was the true reason why the imperial clan was truly superior to all other forces. To activate the imperial weapon, one didn't need to rely on their bloodline to do so. Instead, they needed to rely on a technique that had the same origins as the great emperor. Where did the technique come from? Imperial scroll. The imperial scroll was so important, and was the foundation of an imperial clan. No matter what, the imperial scroll could not possibly be taught to outsiders. For example, many imperial clans had high hopes for Ling Han. In fact, they were even willing to invite Ling Han over and betroth him to a female clansman who wasn't very important. However, Ling Han would only be able to learn the imperial technique in this clan at most, but he would never be able to see the Imperial Scroll in this lifetime. Even among the Imperial clans, those who were not important successors were unable to cultivate the Imperial Scroll, and those clansmen that cultivated the Imperial Scroll all placed restrictions in their minds. If outsiders wanted to forcefully steal it, the restrictions would activate and damage the mind. They would rather have their clansman die. Even if he was the Imperial son, he would definitely not teach the Imperial Scroll to outsiders. Ling Han possessed a saint-level cultivation technique, which he had inherited from the Nine Sons Saint. This was already very, very impressive, especially when it was the Nine Sons Saint. Looking at history, his strength was definitely capable of ranking in the top 10 among saints. As for the exact ranking, that was because there were too many saints that were not of the same generation and could not be compared. The top 10 was already impressive enough. Compared to the Imperial Scroll, the Saint-grade cultivation technique was still slightly inferior. In the end, it could not be considered perfect. Ling Han felt that he had already reached the pinnacle level. Thus, if he wanted to become stronger, he could only start from the cultivation technique. It was impossible for other Imperial clans to teach him the Imperial Scroll. Even Brother Monkey couldn't. Ling Han himself wouldn't ask it of him, so if he wanted to obtain the Imperial Scroll, he could only start from this kind of Imperial Scroll that had no owner. He was very proactive. Similarly, there was also the large black dog and the little azure dragon. Why was the little azure dragon so proactive? Are you guys stupid? If Grandpa Dragon had an Imperial Scroll, what's the point of looking for it? The little azure dragon was asking for a beating the moment it opened its mouth. My father only taught me the Heavenly Dragon Emperor technique, because he doesn't have an Imperial Scroll at all. It was not just the true dragon. None of the earliest divine beasts had passed down any Imperial Scroll, because there was only the Imperial technique. That was because they were created by the heaven and earth, and had comprehended Tao when they were born. They had not even walked through the process of the Imperial path themselves, so how could they possibly have an Imperial Scroll to pass on? The fact that the true dragon could reverse engineer himself and create the Heavenly Dragon Emperor technique was already extremely awesome. Even so, there were still restrictions. One had to have the true dragon bloodline to be able to cultivate it. Looking at the whole world, there were really not many people that qualified. However, the Imperial Scroll was different. As long as one's comprehension ability was high enough, and did not depend on his bloodline, anyone could cultivate it. In comparison, it was clear which was superior. This was also the reason why Ling Han was certain that the great emperors of the future generations would be stronger than those divine beasts in the beginning. What they had comprehended themselves would truly belong to them. Thus, Ling Han, the large black dog, and the little azure dragon all yearned for the Imperial Scroll. They walked all over the mountains and plains, searching for any clues about needless mountains. However, this place had existed for who knew how many years. If clues were so easy to find, wouldn't they have been discovered long ago? After a few days, they had gained nothing. Couldn't be said that way. The regulations here were solidified, and if they saw so much, it would still have some benefits for their future cultivation. Most importantly, there were no ley lines here, because this was not a real planet, but rather one that had been created by compressing a sun. Ling Han could vaguely sense that there were actually veins inside the sun as well. However, his present strength was too weak, and even his senses were very vague. What more when he had to communicate with them? Was it Saint Tyr? If he became a formation saint, would he be able to mobilize even the ley lines in the sun? This was not an exaggeration. In legends, a formation saint was able to use planets as the foundations for formations, and lay out a supreme great formation that could kill even saints. He was thinking too far ahead. Because he could not communicate with the ley lines, Ling Han and the others were also very careful, and did not go too far. After all, there were quite a number of forces that had their eyes on Ling Han, especially the Battle God Palace. They wanted to kill him as soon as possible. Ling Han did not want to create a chance for them. Ling Han returned to the territory of the Nine Sons' Holy Land. He planned to cultivate in seclusion for a few days, and strive to reach the end of the consummate level of the core formation tier as soon as possible. Then, he would advance into the true self tier. In this place, it was really a pity not to cultivate regulations, because the large black dog and little azure dragon were small targets. They continued searching for clues about needless mountains. Could also be said that they hadn't given up yet. After all, this involved an imperial scroll. To say nothing of them, it would be the same even if it was an imperial clan. This was something that could be used for reference. Ling Han, Hunyo's charming voice rang out. Ling Han shook his head. With this beautiful wife by his side, it was really impossible for him to quietly cultivate. He stood up and walked out of the simplified room. However, he shockingly discovered that there was actually Lin Luo with Hunyo and the Empress. Senior Lin. Ling Han immediately went up to greet him. Lin Luo smiled as well, embracing Ling Han warmly. Hunyo bared her teeth, a vicious glint in her eyes. He actually dared to embrace her Ling Han. He was too despicable. "Move your dirty hand away," the Empress said coldly, her expression proud. Lin Luo's expression involuntarily darkened. One looked like she wanted to devour him, while the other looked at him like he was dirt. These two beautiful wives of Ling Han were really too unique. Ling Han, someone's bullying Nyo. Hunyo pouted. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh in spite of himself. Someone actually dares to bully you? Haha. Then you should have beaten him hard, right? No, that guy is stronger than Nyo. Thankfully, Lin Luo came and helped to beat that despicable guy back, Hunyo said. Ling Han's expression became stern, and killing intent was already ignited in his heart. He actually dared to bully his wife? What on earth is going on? He asked the Empress. If he told Hunyo to talk about serious matters, she would often be unreliable. The Empress spoke up and explained the whole story. Actually, it was very simple. She and Hunyo were roaming around and encountered a native of the Mountain Sea Heaven. He seemed to be some second-generation young master or something, and was very arrogant, forcing the Empress and Hunyo to take off their veils. This was naturally rebuked by Hunyo and despised by the Empress. Hence, the two sides got into a fight. Who would have thought that the native was a core formation tier cultivator? The two women were naturally no match for him, and it was at this moment that Lin Luo just happened to appear, forcing the native to retreat and saving the two women. How detestable! Hunyo mumbled as she listened. Ling Han nodded in understanding. He would kill such lecherous people wherever he saw them. Thank you, Senior Lin. He clasped his hands and said to Lin Luo. Lin Luo smiled and said, "There's no need for thanks between us." They had all come from the Genesis world, and were truly on the same side. Ling Han nodded, and asked, "Do you know the name of that native?" "I don't know. He's so ugly, so I didn't care what he said at all." Hunyo shrugged. At this moment, Ling Han didn't know how to complain. Two bitches and that thief, come out. However, right at this moment, shouts were heard from outside. It's that ugly bastard," Hunyo immediately exclaimed. Meanwhile, Ling Han was slightly surprised. Fuck, you were forced to retreat after taking liberties on the streets, yet you still dare to charge over. He was really courting death. Ling Han strode out, only to see 5 people standing outside the door. However, it was clear that 2 of them were in the lead, and they were both young men. The other 3 were a few steps behind, and it was clear that they were servants. Who are you?" A young man looked at Ling Han with an astounded expression. Judging by the voice, it was the person who had spoken just now. In other words, he was the shameless guy who wanted to take liberties with Hunyo and the Empress. Ling Han finally moved. A crisp sound was heard, and the young man was sent flying, then fell heavily onto the ground. The expression of the other young man changed drastically. He had actually not seen clearly how Ling Han had moved. That was really too fast, wasn't it? "You actually dare to hit me?" The young man who had been sent flying quickly got back to his feet. His left cheek was very swollen, and there were also spots of blood. He looked at Ling Han balefully, and did not have the fear that he should have had when his abilities were inferior. Instead, he looked extremely fierce. Of course, it wasn't because he could withstand it, but rather because Ling Han hadn't used his full strength at all. Killed in an instant? How could it be so easy? Now, no matter who you are, you will pay the price for this, the young man roared. Pa! With a flash, he was sent flying again. The other young man still didn't move, but his eyes were filled with fear. That was because Ling Han's speed was too fast, so fast that he couldn't react at all. In other words, if Ling Han made a move on him, he would definitely be unable to parry either. Ah! The first young man screamed in pain. This time, Ling Han had used a little too much force and shattered his protective shield. Furthermore, the gravity field here was terrifyingly strong, and his physique had not cultivated to the extent that he could completely resist it, so he naturally could not help but scream in pain. At this time, the Empress and the others walked out of the simple houses. Damn guy! When the first young man saw the Empress and Hunyo, especially Lin Luo, the killing intent in his eyes became even fiercer. Brother Xian, why aren't you attacking yet? He called out to his companion. Fuck! I called you over to help, but are you just going to watch me get beaten? That Brother Xian's surname was Zhou, and his name was Zhou Xian. His expression was ugly, but he had no intention of making a move at all. The other young man was called Hang Tingyuan, and in the case of the Hang clan, there was a venerate tier elite keeping watch. He was only over 20,000 years old, and had very high hopes of becoming a saint. The strength of the Zhou clan was much weaker. The strongest elite in the clan was only a spirit transformation true lord. Thus, even if Zhou Xian's natural talent was higher than Hang Tingyuan's, and his strength was also stronger, and was even addressed as big brother by the latter, in truth it was Hang Tingyuan that had the dominant position in their relationship. Hang Tingyuan had suffered a loss at the hands of Lin Luo, so he sought Zhou Xian's help, wanting to get his pride back. However, before the main culprit had even appeared, an even more ruthless person had come, causing Zhou Xian to completely lose his temper. He was completely outmatched, all right? Fight my ass. Meanwhile, Ling Han asked Zhou Xian, are you going to make a move? Attack! Attack! Hang Tingyuan shouted loudly, yet Zhou Xian shook his head extremely resolutely. Crazy, he had no wish to seek death. All right, then just obediently watch from the sidelines, Ling Han said, his tone very gentle. However, Zhou Xian felt a chill rise up from his bones. He could hear the killing intent in these words. Thus, he couldn't help but say, the ancestor of the Hang clan is a venerate tier elite. This seemed to be a reminder, but also seemed to be a warning. Ling Han chuckled. In terms of background, my old man is also a venerate tier elite, and there is more than one. You dare! Hang Tingyuan shouted loudly, when he saw Ling Han's eyes filled with killing intent shoot towards him. All the hair on his body stood on end. However, he had been a tyrant for a long time, and even if he felt fear now, he did not have the slightest intention of backing down. Instead, he became even more frenzied. Kneel down immediately and beg for mercy. Otherwise, I will make sure you die a tragic death. Ling Han sighed. I hate it the most when others threaten me, especially for someone like you, who doesn't have much ability to begin with. You only know how to shout at the top of your lungs like a mad dog. It was a good thing that the large black dog had gone out. Otherwise, he would have to be careful of being bitten by the dog at night. Xiao, with a flash of his figure, Hang Tingyuan was once again sent flying with a slap. Hang Tingyuan screamed repeatedly. He could no longer hold up the shield of mystical power. Under the terrifying weight of gravity, he felt as if every bone in his body was cracking, ready to break or even shatter at any moment. This finally made him feel fear, his whole body trembling. He had encountered a ruthless character who was completely unafraid of his background. Now that his helper couldn't help him at all, he hurriedly said, I forfeit! I forfeit! Where there is life, there is hope. As long as he managed to escape this calamity, he would immediately return home and call for reinforcements. Humph! How could these outsiders know how deep the power of their Hang clan was? Pong! However, he felt another slap land on his face, and he was heavily sent flying. Since he dared to tease his wife, there was nothing more to say. There was only one word for it. Kill him. Ling Han was cold, and continued to wave his palms. Pa pa pa. In a few moments, Hang Tingyuan was beaten to death. Scram! He swept an eye over Zhou Xian, his expression incredibly cold. Zhou Xian was so scared that he fell onto the ground, but in the next instant, he hurriedly got back to his feet, as anxious as a stray dog. He hurriedly turned around and fled. "Ha ha, you haven't changed at all," Lin Luo said with a laugh. Ling Han also smiled but did not take it to heart. If it was strength, he had strength, and if it was background, he did not lack background either. What was there to be afraid of? Oh, his wife had been teased, and someone had even come to provoke him. How could it be that he would have to swallow his anger? However, this matter definitely won't end so easily, Lin Luo continued. "And I'll take things as they come." Ling Han smiled eerily. Merely after half a day, someone came from the Hang clan. It wasn't a venerate tier personally arriving, nor was it sect master, spirit transformation true lord, or even true self tier. Instead, it was a white-robed young man, a being of the core formation tier. At first glance, this white-robed young man looked very ordinary. His feet were bare and he appeared very rough, but with a little more attention, one would discover that there was no mystical power shield on him. Without the mystical power shield, he could actually resist this kind of gravity field. This only meant one thing: this guy's body art was extremely powerful, at least in the level of the core formation tier. "My name is Hang Tianxiao," the white-robed young man said calmly. "The Hang Tingyuan that you killed is my younger brother. Have you come for revenge?" Ling Han asked. "Although my brother is unbearable, the bloodline of the Hang clan still flows in his veins. He is not someone that can be killed just because someone says so," Hang Tianxiao said calmly. He looked at Ling Han, and killing intent was already shooting out of his eyes. "It's very simple. A life for a life." Ling Han smiled. "You guys should have done your investigations, right? You know that there are a total of 3 venerate tier elites in the Nine Suns Holy Land. Thus, you guys wouldn't dare to be rash either. You didn't even mobilize true self-tier elites, but rather sent out a core formation tier like you, which can be considered a fair battle. In that case, even the 3 venerate tier elites of our sect wouldn't be able to say anything." There was a slight change in Hang Tianxiao's expression. Ling Han was absolutely right. Otherwise, how could there have been such a troublesome matter? The clan would have long since sent out a true self-tier elite to capture Ling Han and bring him back to the Hang clan, where he would be cut into 8 pieces. "Since you dare to commit murder, do you dare to battle me?" Hang Tianxiao asked coldly. It was a very stupid idea to debate whether the Hang clan would dare or not. Ling Han smiled faintly. "If I beat you to death, who would the Hang clan send? You can't kill me." Hang Tianxiao shook his head, appearing to be filled with confidence. "All right, then I'll reserve a bit of anticipation," Ling Han said with a smile. Hang Tianxiao humphed and said, "You're far too conceited. You have to realize that this is the Mountain Sea Heaven. What you mean is that the people of the Mountain Sea Heaven are stronger than the people outside?" Ling Han asked. "That's right." Hang Tianxiao pointed at the surroundings. "Here, the heaven and earth's energy is incredibly dense, making it half the work and double the effect when you cultivate. Furthermore, the gravity field is like a mountain, tempering yourself at all times. The regulations materialize, and comprehending the heaven and earth's profound mysteries is 10 times, or even 100 times easier. So, do we have a reason for not being strong? In this place, even a pig could become a celestial being." Ling Han couldn't help but smile. "Are you talking about the guy that I killed with a single palm strike just now? He's nothing but a piece of trash," Hang Tianxiao said coldly. "However, even if he's a piece of trash, he's still a member of our Hang clan. It's not up to you to kill him." "Sigh, so much nonsense." Ling Han shook his head. "Heh, since you're in such a rush to die, I'll oblige you." Hang Tianxiao strode towards Ling Han. In this place, the gravity fields were terrifying, and even those at the core formation tier wouldn't be able to soar into the sky. However, the ground here was incredibly firm, and attacks at the level of the core formation tier couldn't damage it at all. Thus, even if they battled on the ground, they wouldn't cause much damage. He had already approached and then shot out a punch. Ling Han stretched out his hand, his index and middle fingers forming the shape of shears. With a light pinch, the fist that Hang Tianxiao had thrown came to an abrupt stop. What? Hang Tianxiao did not speak, but the expression on his face clearly said these words. How was this possible? Although his punch hadn't unleashed its full might, Ling Han had stopped it with just 2 fingers. Just how terrifying was his power. Hee, after bragging for so long, you ended up being slapped in the face. How do you feel? Ling Han asked with a smile. Hang Tianxiao did not answer. Instead, he gave a loud shout. Boom! A majestic light burst out of the palm of his hand, turning into an ice phoenix that pounced towards Ling Han. In the first place, he was already very close to Ling Han. Thus, this attack had arrived in front of Ling Han in a flash, practically not giving Ling Han any chance to dodge or parry. He had succeeded. A smile appeared on Hang Tianxiao's face. With this strike, Ling Han should be dead for sure. However, he was shocked to see that Ling Han puffed up slightly before blowing out, easily blowing the ice phoenix into pieces. Then, the cold wind blew towards him, making him feel as if all the blood in his body had been frozen. Then he felt nothing. It was not because the cold air had disappeared, but rather because it was too cold and had damaged his nerves. This was an attack that he had delivered. He naturally knew how terrifying this ice-like energy was. Though it had been blown apart by Ling Han, causing its might to decrease greatly, it could still be considered domineering. If all of this was blasted onto him, how terrifying would that be? He hurriedly channeled his mystical power to expel the invading ice element energy. Ling Han shook lightly, and Hang Tianxiao was sent flying. Hang Tianxiao also shook his body, and instantly, a large amount of shattered ice fell. He was a body arts cultivator, so his physique was tough. With the mystical power driving him, he soon recovered. I underestimated you. He looked at Ling Han, and his expression became solemn, with a sliver of wariness. He could not disperse his own attack so easily. Thus, Ling Han's mystical power was definitely superior to his. However, he was only solemn and not afraid of battle because he still had body art. This was the strength of Mountain Sea Heaven cultivators, and was something that cultivators from the outside world could only envy but not reach. Afraid now? Ling Han asked calmly. Hang Tianxiao humphed. Do you think I'm afraid of you? You cultivators from the outside world only cultivate martial arts, yet have completely overlooked the cultivation of body art. You would have no idea at all how powerful defense would be after body art becomes strong, and how terrifying its attack power would be. He gave a loud shout and charged towards Ling Han. Pung, pung, pung. As he ran, the ground trembled madly, as if a primitive dragon elephant was running. Xiao, as if he had turned into a streak of light, his speed was extremely fast. He actually used himself as a weapon and crashed towards Ling Han. This was purely taking on Ling Han head-on with his physique. My physique is as tough as divine metal of the same level, and I myself am a deadly weapon. Competing with him in physique? Ling Han laughed loudly. Fine, then let's have a competition to see whose physique was stronger. He also started to run, crashing straight towards Hang Tianxiao. Are you seeking death? Hang Tianxiao sneered internally. Ling Han's mystical power was superior to his, so he should make full use of this advantage, pull out the distance and attack him. It should be known that body arts was most adept in close-quarter combat. Fine, I'll oblige you. Pong! Neither of them had any intention of dodging, so they naturally crashed into each other. Hang Tianxiao felt as if his body of flesh and blood had crashed into an iron plate. He could clearly feel his skin rupture, his muscles tear, his blood vessels burst one after another, and his bones had also turned into pieces. In fact, his internal organs had also shattered under the pressure. Holy fuck! This guy's physique is actually more powerful than mine. Then he lost consciousness. Ling Han gave and with a light tremor, Hang Tianxiao was sent flying. However, the present Hang Tianxiao no longer looked human, but rather looked like he had turned into a bloody pancake. He was dead. Ling Han scratched his head. This time, he really didn't want to kill anyone. But who knew that Hang Tianxiao's physique would be so fragile? It was shattered with a single crash. He was too weak. So what if he was dead? In any case, he had already killed a member of the Hang clan, so it did not matter if he killed one more. News of this battle quickly spread. Though there was no galaxy network in the Mountain Sea heaven, after so many years, the natives had also invented other means of communication. Communication was not a problem. What? Hang Tianxiao was defeated? Lost to an outsider? How is this possible? Although Hang Tianxiao can't be considered a top-notch prodigy, he can still be ranked in the top 50 on the level of the core formation tier. Compared to outsiders, we have also cultivated body art, so how could we possibly be no match for outsiders? The natives of Mountain Sea Heaven practically exploded in uproar. They were all unwilling to accept this result, and thought that they were the true number one force in the galaxy. Even the Imperial clan was no match for them, and now Hang Tianxiao had been killed. This incited the public indignation of the younger generation of Mountain Sea Heaven. They all called on the few prodigies that were ranked higher to step out and suppress Ling Han, to regain the pride of Mountain Sea Heaven. However, this was not the only conflict between outsiders and natives. Very quickly, it was revealed that a local prodigy had moved aggressively and defeated an imperial son. When the news came out, it was like a stone had been thrown into a calm lake, causing an astonishing ripple. The imperial son had actually lost? Ling Han recognized this imperial son who had been defeated. His name was Wuxia. When he had been at the True Dragon Abyss, Wuxia was also one of the few people who had obtained the dragon essence. He had even fought fiercely with Ling Han, and his abilities were quite impressive. He had not thought that he would actually lose at the hands of a native. Wuxia's power is about 31 heavens, and added with the imperial technique, his battle prowess can reach 34 heavens. Ling Han murmured, "However, I believe that Wuxia can't possibly use the imperial blood. After all, it doesn't involve benefits and life and death battles at present. So it's not worth it to waste a chance to combust the imperial blood. Even if the members of imperial clans had a way to stimulate imperial blood, they would still have to pay an exorbitant price." Ling Han had heard Qi Menghan say that the blood of a saint had to be used as a medium, and it would be a loss in terms of the bigger picture. Thus, only the imperial son could enjoy this kind of benefit. The person who defeated Wuxia is called an Siyuan, and he is the third strongest elite in core formation tier of the Mountain Sea Heaven. Ling Han found out about the situation. Being able to defeat the imperial son, he would become a prodigy that everyone would pay attention to no matter where he went. For example, he had only truly become famous in the galaxy from his defeat of Lin Lang onwards. And now the natives were also boiling over. Though Hang Tianxiao had lost, he could not be considered an elite, and what kind of concept was the imperial son in the outside world? A synonym for invincibility among his peers. Thus, and Siyuan's victory signified that he had trampled all of the prodigies of the outside world under his feet. Was there any need to challenge Ling Han? Of course, there was no need. Could you be as awesome as the imperial son? What a joke. The natives here had no lack of understanding of the outside world, because the majority of them were actually the descendants left behind by generations of outsiders here. Essentially, there was not much difference. And in the circle of outsiders, it also caused a huge commotion. The imperial son had actually lost. This was inconceivable. The synonym for invincibility among those at the same cultivation level had now suffered repeated rebuke. First, there was Ling Han, then there was the little azure dragon, and now even a native was so awesome. In future, who would be able to equate the words invincible among those at the same cultivation level with the words imperial son? In order to rectify his name, an imperial son immediately issued a challenge to an Siyuan, and the result? Defeat. There was only one imperial son that had lost, and it could be attributed to poor performance, poor condition, and slightly bad luck. However, 2 imperial sons had been defeated. This only meant one thing, and that was this an Siyuan was really powerful. Not long after this had happened, a 3rd imperial son moved. In the end, he had still suffered a terrible defeat. That an Siyuan's mystical power is only at 24 heavens. However, his body art is too terrifying. His pure physical power has already reached 31 heavens, and when he uses his mystical power at the same time, his power can reach 33 heavens. Furthermore, Body Arts' defense is astonishing, and the damage caused by their attacks is pitifully small. That's right. Unless you can suppress him in terms of battle prowess, it would really be difficult to succeed. Damn it, before the true self tier, Body Arts are the most advantageous. After advancing into the true self tier, we'll be able to cultivate the regulations which can cause double the damage to Body Arts. It just has to be this cultivation level. After these 3 battles, and Xianxia's strength was naturally clear. His abilities were practically transparent, but it was precisely because of this that people were in despair. At the level of the core formation tier, Body Arts was the most awesome. Cultivators of mystical power were unable to draw on the regulations of heaven and earth, and there was practically nothing they could do against powerful Body Arts. For example, in the battle between Ling Han and the Little Azure Dragon, it was clear that Ling Han had the advantage in battle prowess, but the Little Azure Dragon merely took it head-on with its tough physique, and was only beaten black and blue. And this was still because Ling Han's abilities were stronger. Now, and Xianxia's battle prowess was superior to the Imperial Sun, so it was naturally a complete defeat. In the eyes of outsiders, the Mountain Sea Heaven was only a small place, pitifully small, but in such a small place, someone that could defeat the Imperial Sun actually appeared. This was a great blow to everyone's hearts. It should be known that Xianxia is only the 3rd strongest elite, so just how powerful would the 2nd and 1st place be? If our golden generation could make a move, we would definitely let these natives know what true strength is. Oh, that's right. Don't we still have the Imperial Sun Killer, Ling Han, and the Imperial Daughter Killer, the 4-legged snake? Let them attack. A voice rang out among the outsiders, and that was to ask Ling Han and Little Azure Dragon to move and challenge Xianxia. They shouted at the natives that once these 2 deadly power were used, whatever Xianxia, he would immediately become a coward and hide away. The natives naturally did not believe this. In their understanding, the most powerful among the outsiders was the Imperial Sun, a synonym for invincibility among his peers. Oh, and now you have defeated 3 Imperial Suns, yet make up an Imperial Sun Killer now. One look and they could tell that this was fake. Oh, when he defeated Ling Han, would another killer of Imperial Sun Killers appear? Was there no end to this? Sore loser. The argument between the 2 sides became more and more intense. In the Mountain Sea Heaven, there were also turbulent undercurrents, and it was possible that they would start fighting at any time. Furthermore, once they started fighting, it would be a group battle. Right at this moment, the Donglin Imperial clan suddenly hosted a banquet, inviting all the outsiders and native prodigies for tea and discuss Dao. When the news spread out, the entire Mountain Sea Heaven was in an uproar. The current generation of the Donglin Imperial clan was one where the Yin flourishes and the Yang declines one. The Imperial daughter, Qi Menghan, claimed to be comparable to the Golden Generation, and was also the seductive beauty ranked 3rd on the exquisite beauty leaderboard. Thus, this banquet was definitely hosted by her. Thus, whether it was outsiders or natives, they were all overjoyed and decided to attend this banquet. If Celestial Maiden Qi makes a move, she would be able to redeem the pride of the Imperial clans. It is said that Fairy Qi is capable of matching the Golden Generation. Humph, it's time to deal with those country bumpkins. Do they really think that they are invincible in this world? This was the voice of an outsider, and among the natives it was naturally a completely different voice. They were filled with fanatical confidence in Xianxia and the other prodigies. Haha! What Golden Generation? In front of Lord E and Lord Hua, they can't even withstand a single blow. I heard that this Imperial daughter from the Donglin Imperial clan is the 3rd most beautiful woman on the exquisite leaderboard? Just let Lord and take her then. If that's really the case, who knows how red-faced with embarrassment those so-called Imperial sons would be. In short, both sides were very expectant. The conflict between outsiders and natives had already accumulated to the point that it was about to explode. This was an opportunity. Ling Han also received an invitation. The Little Azure Dragon also received one, and the large black dog also received one. Haha! Just see Grandpa Dog unleash his might, insta-killing everything in his way. The large black dog shook his behind, and iron underwear was still the most eye-catching item. It had already advanced the Heavenly Dragon Emperor technique to the core formation tier chapter, and its cultivation level had also advanced by leaps and bounds, approaching the end of the core formation tier. It was very likely that it would break through to the true self tier before Ling Han did. Couldn't be helped. Ling Han pursued absolute perfection, so his advancement would naturally be correspondingly slower. Old Black, it's not that Grandpa Dragon wants to strike a blow on you, but you really can't, the little Azure Dragon said with a serious expression. Woof, you actually dare to say that Grandpa Dog can't. 1. The large black dog immediately jumped up. You can't, your whole family can't. Grandpa Dog is very capable, very awesome. The little Azure Dragon was extremely detestable, and it said, if even my entire family can't do it, then how did Grandpa Dragon come into being? Ling Han's expression darkened. There were so many unreliable people by his side. Old Black, four-legged snake has a point. He said to the large black dog, your mystical power is only about 35 heavens, which is not inferior to Xianxia. However, you have just begun to cultivate the Heavenly Dragon Emperor technique's core formation tier chapter, and body art is not of much help yet, so you are definitely no match for Xianxia. One of the unique traits of the body art was its strong defense. Furthermore, it did not need to be maintained with mystical power. It lasted for a long time. Thus, it had an especially great advantage in battle. The large black dog was depressed. Why can't we hold the banquet a few days later? Otherwise, it would be a great opportunity for Grandpa Dog to flip out. You just watch the excitement, Ling Han said. That's right. Leave the fighting to Grandpa Dragon and Little Han. The little Azure Dragon also added in. The large black dog was extremely displeased. Wasn't the purpose of cultivating such strength just to show off? Fuck. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye, and it was already the day that the Donglin Imperial Clan would host a banquet at the Imperial Clan residence. When it was close to evening, chariot after chariot headed towards the temporary base of the Donglin Imperial Clan. Ordinary carriages couldn't possibly travel in the mountain sea heaven. The gravity fields were too terrifying and could easily destroy everything. Thus, chariots could only be mobilized. These chariots were built for battle, so they could naturally adapt to all kinds of harsh conditions. Ling Han and the others were poor. They lacked background, so they naturally couldn't possess chariots. Moreover, this matter didn't alert the Nine Suns' Holy Land. Otherwise, Ling Han could borrow one from the Nine Mountains Venerate. It's fine. This is called keeping a low profile. Keep a low profile and then show off. Let's see if you're afraid. The large black dog and little Azure Dragon consoled themselves as they watched chariot after chariot fly by. After walking for a while, they finally arrived at the encampment of the Donglin Imperial Clan. This was the Imperial Clan, and they were led by saints. It was unknown whether they had brought the Imperial weapon over as well, but the name of Imperial Clan was already powerful enough. They occupied one of the best places to cultivate. Regulations filled the skies here, and the heaven and earth energy here was indescribably dense. There were people assigned to receive them, and the examination was very strict. Those who did not have an invitation card could forget about sneaking in. Ling Han couldn't help but think back to the last time he had gone to the Donglin Imperial Clan to attend the banquet. At the time, he hadn't had an invitation, and it was Qi Mengshan who had brought him in. Why was the Donglin Imperial Clan so fond of hosting banquets? What was wrong with them? After passing the examination, Ling Han and the others continued onwards. Because there were too many people, and it was inevitable that there would be a battle during the so-called discussion of Tao. The venue for this banquet was naturally arranged in the open air. Only some tables and chairs were needed. At this moment, a large number of people had already arrived. They were all in groups of 3 to 5, communicating among themselves. However, it could be clearly seen that there was a clear separation between outsiders and natives. Little Han, how do you plan on showing off? The large black dog approached and asked. Ling Han glared at it. Don't just have such narrow-minded thoughts all day long. Oh, the large black dog turned around and left. However, it had just left. When the little Azure Dragon approached, Little Han, how do you plan on showing off? Fuck. Have you guys made an agreement to ask the same thing before this? Ling Han was rendered speechless, and he immediately found a table to sit down. He poured himself a cup of tea and began to savor it. To be honest, he still missed the fine wine of the Donglin Imperial clan. Why had they switched to tea this time? Couldn't be that he had drunk them into poverty, right? Is this where you are sitting? Immediately, a voice rang out by his ear. Ling Han turned around to look. This was a native. It wasn't because his attire was different from the people outside, but rather because he hadn't activated the mystical power shield. The words body arts were practically enough to explain his identity. What is it? Can't I sit here? He asked calmly. Humph, are you provoking? That native asked balefully, already bringing with him a strong chill. Ling Han's eyes swept over the surroundings. Oh, no wonder. There were natives all around him. This could be considered as him having entered into a wolf's den. However, since he had already sat down, he had no plans to get up again. There's no rule that states where one can sit, so I can sit wherever I want, he said with a smile. That would have to depend on whether you have that kind of ability or not. That native moved and grabbed out at Ling Han. However, with a wave of Ling Han's hand, pong, the native was sent flying, lying on the ground and groaning. Little Han, you still say you don't want to show off? See, Grandpa Dog has just left, and you're already starting to act cool? The large black dog immediately said. That's right, you are so mean. The little azure dragon also grumbled. He was also an incredibly coquettish dragon. Ling Han sighed and shrugged. I really have no intention of showing off. Sigh. This unintentional show-off is even more fatal. The large black dog exclaimed ruefully. That's right, that's right. The little azure dragon nodded in agreement. Holy fuck. These two idiots. Ling Han didn't plan to pay any attention to them. However, a native had been sent flying, and this was in their territory at that. How could the other natives let the matter go? Instantly, a large number of natives looked over. A considerable number had already stood up and were approaching Ling Han's table. It's time for a fight. The large black dog rubbed his paws together in excitement. It's time for Grandpa Dragon to show off. The little azure dragon was also filled with anticipation. You are Ling Han. One of the natives recognized Ling Han, the one who beat Hang Tianxiao to death. When these words fell, the eyes of all the natives froze, and their fury blazed even hotter. Fuck, we haven't called you for an accounting yet you've already come to bully us. Ling Han's expression became serious, and he said, I want to make it clear that I wasn't the one who killed Hang Tianxiao. He was the one who had killed himself. If he had to blame someone, he could only blame his body arts for not being strong enough. It was really not him who had done it. However, in the eyes of the natives, Ling Han was clearly cowering. This was very natural. Even the imperial son had lost, so what was he worth? Since you are cowering, you should adjust your attitude first. Kneel! All the natives shouted. You have come to admit cowardice, but what is the meaning of sitting so boldly? Ling Han was surprised. What's wrong with your brains? When did I say that I was going to cower? Could it be that not only do you guys have intelligence problems, but your ears also don't work well? Holy fuck! The natives were instantly enraged. Why was this brat's mouth so vicious? Beat him up! Someone immediately shouted. Beat him up! Even more people agreed. The large black dog looked at the little azure dragon and said earnestly, See, this is the consequence of showing off too much. You'll be beaten. N. The little azure dragon nodded repeatedly. Showing off was a major problem. Everyone, the banquet is about to begin. Would you all please sit down? A lively voice rang out, and a beautiful figure appeared in front of everyone. Her white dress could not conceal her ample and beautiful curves, causing one's imagination to run wild. The imperial daughter Qi Menghan. The imperial daughter still had a lot of face. After all, there were only a few people who could defeat the imperial son. The imperial clan was still high and noble, and would not fall to the ground just because 3 imperial sons had lost. Furthermore, Qi Menghan was also a beauty, an exquisite seductive beauty, and could be ranked in the top 3 in the universe. Faced with such a beauty, everyone would have to give her some face. Thus, all the natives sat down, but they all frowned at Ling Han. For now, they would suppress their anger. When they discussed Dao later, they would definitely let this guy know how powerful he was. Ling Han was unconcerned and continued to drink his tea. "Fuck, you've become even more impressive," the large black dog said in an exaggerated manner. "You didn't get a beating for showing off? How illogical." The little azure dragon also sat at the table, poured itself some tea, and began to drink. "And good tea," he said, shaking his head. "Stop pretending," Ling Han said with a cold chuckle. This guy had never drunk tea at all, yet now he looked like he understood the art of tea very well. The little azure dragon couldn't help but fly into a humiliated rage after being exposed. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't defeat Ling Han, he would definitely beat this guy up. He kept affecting his ability to show off. On the other side, Qi Menghan, as the host, also began to host the banquet. She was extremely charismatic, and even if she said something unimportant, everyone would nod repeatedly, not feeling bored at all. However, the highlight of this banquet was still the discussion of Dao. Thus, Qi Menghan didn't beat around the bush, and soon returned to the main topic. "Haha, I am Husu. Who would like to spar with me?" A bearded man leaped out and arrived at the empty space in front of them. It was wide enough here to support the battle of core formation tiers. In the mountain sea heaven, the ground was incredibly firm, and the damage that the core formation tier cultivators could cause was limited. Furthermore, the gravity fields were terrifying, which greatly affected the speed of cultivators. Thus, there was no need for a large place for the core formation tier cultivators to spar. This bearded man was a native, and he didn't use his mystical power as a shield, appearing very domineering. "Let me spar with you." An outsider leaped out, and without another word, the two of them began fighting. The two sides exchanged blows, and the battle was extremely intense. Those who could come here to attend the banquet, whether they were outsiders or natives, were definitely prodigy level. Nobodies were definitely not qualified. In the first place, this was a stage for prodigies from both sides to compete, so what was the point of letting mediocre people waste their time here? The battle became more and more intense, but as time passed, the advantage of the natives was displayed. They had lived here all this while, and had long since adapted to the terrifying gravity fields. Furthermore, their physiques were tough, and their defenses existed as if they were born with it. Thus, if one couldn't defeat them as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, in a drawn-out battle, the advantage of the native's physique being tough would become greater and greater, and ultimately, form a winning situation. As expected, after only 10 minutes of fighting, the bearded man's advantage was fully displayed, defeating his opponent, adding another victory to the native camp. This caused the expressions of the outsiders to become ugly. Though neither side had sent out their trump card, every victory and defeat would affect the pride of both sides. Whoever lost would be equivalent to having suffered a slap, which was a very terrible sensation. Lu Ming is one of the top 10 of the Galaxy Network, yet he was defeated so quickly. No one of the top 10 in the Galaxy Network should step up anymore. Even if they go up, we'll only lose one more battle. It has to be stronger. The Galaxy Network did not include all the young prodigies. It was not only the Imperial clans that did not connect to the Galaxy Network. It was the same for a great many Holy Lands. Thus, there were naturally some that had slipped through the net. Even if they were not the Imperial clan members, their strength had still surpassed the top 10 of the Galaxy Network. A Dao child from a Holy Land moved, and soon defeated the bearded man, turning the tables for the outsiders. However, another elite immediately walked out from the natives, easily defeating this Dao child. Lu Feng, ranked 10th in Mountain Sea Heaven. This was a fierce person. Though he was inferior to Xianxia, who had defeated the Imperial Sun, the 10 great elites had already made their move, which meant that the natives were not interested in slowly raising the level of their battle and directly entering into this climax. The outsiders all exchanged looks. The other side had mobilized the top 10 elites, and it looked like they would have to mobilize the Imperial Sons. "I'll go," a young man said calmly, walking out with his hands clasped behind his back. "Sure, Yuanjin," everyone exclaimed in shock. This was a genuine Imperial Son. Ling Han glanced at him and shook his head internally. Sure, Yuanjin and Su Jie's strength were not much different. He may be able to win 1 or 2 battles, but it was definitely impossible that he could defeat Siyuan. As expected, the Imperial Son moved, and his battle prowess was terrifying. Very soon he had obtained a victory, and next, he had won all 3 battles, dazzling the eyes of the natives. The Imperial Son was indeed powerful. No wonder he was invincible among his peers. However, the natives were still filled with confidence because their top 3 elites were completely different, each stronger than the last. Furthermore, they were not just a little bit stronger. Xiao, a person, leaped out. He had a slender figure, and his face was also extraordinarily long, looking incredibly cold. Siyuan, Lord N. Instantly, the natives howled madly, as if they had gone mad. The outsiders had the golden generation, and the mountain sea heaven had something similar. Siyuan, Yi Qianhong, and Hua Yuchang were members of their golden generation. However, there were relatively few of them, only 3 of them. However, quality was more important than quantity. 3 people was enough. Sure, Yuanjin immediately looked solemn. This was a strong opponent, and he did not have the slightest chance of winning. On the other hand, Siyuan's expression was relaxed. He had already defeated 3 Imperial Sons, so he was naturally filled with confidence. "Please." Sure, Yuanjin clasped his hands and said. He now had a bit more respect for powerful opponents. Although Siyuan was cold and aloof, he didn't dare to act too haughtily before the Imperial Son. Instead, he clasped his hands and said, "Please." As his words fell, the 2 great prodigies began a fierce exchange of blows. Hong! 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 They continued to battle, and it wasn't long before their advantage was revealed. Siyuan had the upper hand. His power was stronger, and his physique was more powerful. If there were any shortcomings, it would be celestial technique. After all, he did not have the inheritance of the Great Imperial Scroll and Great Imperial Technique. In this aspect, he was inferior to the Imperial Son, but if one did not reach the level of the true self-tier in the Great Imperial Scroll and Imperial Technique, it actually did not have much of an advantage over a saint-level celestial technique. Thus, Siyuan had completely suppressed Sure Yuanjin, and his advantage was not just by a little bit. In just a few hundred moves, Sure Yuanjin admitted defeat on his own volition. Otherwise, he would be in for a lot of trouble. Another Imperial Son had been defeated. Counting Su Jie and the others from before, there were already 4 Imperial Sons that had been defeated, causing all the outsiders to look livid. This was too demoralizing to their morale. On the other hand, the natives were all exalted and proud. Who wants to spar next? Siyuan swept his gaze over the gathered masses. This time, it was a tea tasting and Tao discussion, so it was naturally impossible that there would only be a single Imperial Son. Was there anyone stronger? "Let me try." A young man walked out. Golden Silk Moth Imperial Clan Zhang Fong. Ling Han couldn't help but nod, and said, "In this guy's case, he has a 70% chance of winning." 70%? The little azure dragon was slightly surprised. He and the large black dog had both witnessed Zhang Fong's strength. Was there such a high chance of winning? Ling Han nodded and said, "You guys have only seen Zhang Fong move, and have never actually battled with him, so you don't know him very well. His original power has reached 35 heavens, and if he channels the Imperial Technique, his battle prowess can reach 38 heavens. This is enough to tear through Yuan's defenses. Hence, if Siyuan is only at his current level, then he would definitely be no match for Zhang Fong. The other 30% chance is based on Siyuan's trump card. Without a trump card, Zhang Fong has a 100% chance of winning." The little azure dragon and the large black dog both nodded. Only Ling Han had fought with Zhang Fong before, so Ling Han definitely knew the situation better than them. They were discussing spiritedly, and if they were in the area of outsiders, there would be no problem at all. but to say this among the natives, it immediately attracted a great many furious gazes. Fuck, in their camp, he still dared to speak badly of Xianxia? Humph. Just wait and see how Lord and will unleash his might. Facts speak louder than anything else. Just wait to be slapped in the face. After Lord and defeats all Imperial sons, we'll come challenge this detestable guy. All right. These people did not lower their voices either, and deliberately allowed Ling Han to hear them clearly. Ling Han merely smiled, completely unconcerned. Meanwhile, the little azure dragon jumped onto the table and said, "Remember what you're saying now. Don't forget to challenge little Han later. Whoever doesn't step out will be a bastard." This kind of provocation naturally made the natives very displeased. It was just a four-legged snake, and it actually dared to shout at them. Kill this outsider first, then stew this four-legged snake. As they conversed, the battle between Zhang Fong and Xianxia had already begun. And Xianxia was indeed powerful, with his raw power reaching as high as 33 heavens. However, this was still inferior to Zhang Fong, and he was still a whopping 3 heavens inferior to Zhang Fong's battle prowess. Thus, he was at a disadvantage upon clashing with Zhang Fong, and he was completely suppressed. However, his powerful physique was indeed impressive. Even though he was being suppressed by an advantage of 3 heavens in battle prowess, he was still able to defend with great perseverance. He didn't collapse with a single strike. Otherwise, if there was a gap of 3 heavens in battle prowess, the result would be being insta-killed. This result immediately silenced the natives. The gap in strength was obvious. No one could lie through their teeth, right? And Xianxia resisted in all ways, trying to find a chance to turn the tables. But in the end, in terms of trump cards, who could match the Imperial clan? Thus, being suppressed by the Imperial clan member in strength, there was definitely no hope of turning the tables. After several dozen more exchanges, and Xianxia was already riddled with wounds. In fact, even his bones could be seen from a few of his wounds. This was an extremely harrowing sight. He had no choice but to admit defeat. If he continued to fight, he would not just suffer superficial injuries. Cheers instantly erupted among the outsiders when they saw Xianxia being defeated. After defeating 4 Imperial sons in a row, he had finally managed to bite off more than he could chew. On the other hand, the expressions of the natives were extremely ugly. But only after a while, someone called out, "Hua Yuchang! Lord Hua! Lord Hua! Lord Hua!" The natives all roared loudly, their voices like a tsunami, wave after wave. Hua Yuchang, one of the 3 prodigies of the mountain sea heaven, ranked above even Xianxia. Where was he? Ling Han followed everyone's gaze, and involuntarily, the corners of his mouth twitched. That was because the focus of everyone's attention was on the table next to his. A man was presently seated and drinking tea, but one of his legs was raised onto a chair. It was bared as well, and the corner of his pants was also curled up onto his calf, revealing long black leg hair. What a rough guy. Ling Han's eyes moved further upwards. This barefooted man had a thin figure, but his hands were long and black, the joints popping out like bamboo. He held the teacup in one hand, while his other hand was rubbing his foot. What a personality. Hua Yuchang. Judging by the name, this should be a coquettish and bewitching man. The name was completely incompatible with this young man who was picking his feet. "Please move, Lord Hua." A man half knelt and said to the man who was picking at his feet. "Lord Hua, please move." More people knelt down, inviting this person to battle. This guy was really Hua Yuchang. This was too fucking blinding. Ling Han cursed madly in his heart. This persona was really too ruined, wasn't it? At this moment, Hua Yuchang put down his teacup. He searched for a while, and his bare feet were stuffed into his straw sandals. He stood up and walked forwards. However, he had only taken 2 steps when, pang, he collapsed. "Oh no, Lord Hua is drunk. Fuck. Outsiders are too treacherous to actually use such underhanded means to make Lord Hua unable to take the field." All the natives exclaimed in unison, all of them looking furious. Drunk on tea. Ling Han couldn't help but grimace. There were too many things to complain about. For a moment, he didn't even know where to start. Just as everyone was about to lift Hua Yuchang up, pong! Those people separated like flowers scattered by a celestial maiden, and Hua Yuchang had already stood up. His eyes were as red as blood, and his whole body was exuding an incredibly terrifying killing intent, causing one to shiver all over. Oh no, Lord Hua is extremely drunk this time. He's gone crazy from being drunk, someone said in a trembling voice. Run! Everyone dispersed, as if avoiding snakes and scorpions. Lord Hua, who's gone mad with drunkenness. His battle prowess is even 3 times higher than usual. And, in short, it's too terrifying. Seeing this, Zhang Fang couldn't help but humph and charge over. There was no one in the surroundings, and Hua Yuchang was a little dazed. At this moment, Zhang Fang charged over, giving him a target. He immediately shouted loudly and charged towards Zhang Fang. Boom! The 2 prodigies exchanged a blow, instantly setting off tumultuous waves. Ling Han's eyes involuntarily lit up. This Hua Yuchang was not bad. Amazing! He was very familiar with Zhang Fang's strength, so it was very easy for him to deduce Hua Yuchang's strength. His original power was about 36 heavens, and was slightly stronger than Zhang Fang. However, in terms of the celestial technique, Zhang Fang was naturally slightly superior. Thus, the 2 of them just happened to fight to a tie. If they fought to a tie, that also meant that if Zhang Fang didn't have any special methods, he would lose. Couldn't be helped. In a drawn-out battle, body arts definitely had the advantage. However, after battling for a while longer, Ling Han discovered just how terrifying this drunk person was. Hua Yuchang's current style of fighting completely lacked the demeanor of an elite. Though body arts was definitely a close-quarters battle, and he was trying his best to make full use of his advantage, he was really too extreme. Like an octopus, he entwined himself around Zhang Fang. His legs wrapped around Zhang Fang's waist. His arms wrapped tightly around the latter's neck. He even opened his mouth to bite at Zhang Fang's cheek. How could Zhang Fang deal with this? As the imperial son, he had no choice but to admit defeat. But it should be known that Hua Yuchang was not aware now. Even if he admitted defeat, so what? He did not let go at all, causing Zhang Fang to cry out in pain. Everyone was speechless. Was this the battle between prodigies that they were anticipating? This was completely a street brawl between rascals. No wonder the expressions of the natives were so strange. A Hua Yuchang that was drunk on tea was practically a pervert. Hua Yuchang was gnawing and biting, without a shred of the bearing of an elite. He was completely a ruffian. What was worse, he even stuffed his bare foot into Zhang Fang's mouth, scaring the golden silk moth imperial son so much that his face turned green, and he fled at all costs. He was the imperial son, after all, and had astonishingly many tricks up his sleeve. He had really succeeded, but multiple wounds had also been left on his body, and he was in an extremely sorry state. However, when Hua Yuchang went crazy, he did not have any qualms at all. He broke out into a run and set off in pursuit of Zhang Fang. Holy fuck! Zhang Fang hurriedly ran, using all his strength. Though he had cultivated an emperor-level movement technique, so his speed should have been faster than Hua Yuchang, the gravity fields here were too strong, and at the level of the core formation tier, the advantage of the imperial technique was really not all that great. Thus, Hua Yuchang's speed was not the slightest bit inferior to his, and followed closely behind him. One fled, while the other pursued, circling around the whole area. Originally, it should have been a competition on the level of the highest prodigy. But now, it was no different from a street brawl between ruffians and hoodlums, which was truly embarrassing. The outcome of the battle had actually been decided, but Hua Yuchang had gone mad, and pursued him relentlessly, forcing Zhang Fang to only be able to continuously flee. He could not stop at all. Though the outsiders had ugly expressions, the natives were also feeling extremely awkward. After another while, Hua Yuchang suddenly stopped, then collapsed to the ground, snoring loudly. Right, he had fallen into a deep slumber. Zhang Fang finally breathed a sigh of relief, feeling something slippery on his face. It was most likely Hua Yuchang's drool, almost driving him crazy with his misophobic nature. Though this was a farce, it still could not change the result of the natives being stronger. All of a sudden, Everyone's eyes turned to look at Qi Menghan. This was the strongest imperial daughter that was comparable to the Golden Generation. Perhaps, her battle prowess was even superior to Zhang Fang. If she made a move, she might have a chance of winning. However, Qi Menghan acted as if she hadn't seen anything. What kind of joke was this? Fighting with a competitor like Hua Yuchang? Being cuddled was not enough, and he was even forcefully stuffing his feet into your mouth. Are you afraid? So, right at this moment, Hua Yuchang suddenly stood up again, like a bamboo pole. He was a little dazed, and swept his gaze over the surroundings. Then, his eyes focused on Zhang Fang. Come, let us have a spar. Spar your sister. Zhang Fang mocked internally. The present Hua Yuchang should have already woken up from his intoxicated state, yet had completely forgotten that he had gone tea-crazy. Thus, he did not remember that the two of them had already sparred, and was still provoking him. However, even though Hua Yuchang had regained consciousness, Zhang Fang still had a strong psychological trauma. He would never fight with such a competitor again. What is it? Are you afraid? Hua Yuchang continued to provoke him. Zhang Fang turned a deaf ear to him. He could still smell the stench of drool on his face, making him gag. Lord Hua is mighty. Lord Hua is awesome. The natives all shouted loudly, completely ignoring the feelings of outsiders. Is there anyone else who can fight? If there's no one who can fight, lower your head and tuck your tail between your legs. Don't be arrogant. That imperial daughter or whatever, come and fight with our Lord Hua. If you lose, why don't you become Lord Hua's wife? Good. This is a good idea. The natives jeered one after another, causing all the outsiders' expressions to darken, looking extremely ugly. Qi Menghan was the imperial daughter, and the imperial clans were revered by the whole world. Additionally, Qi Menghan was ranked third on the exquisite beauty leaderboard. So who didn't admire her greatly? Now, these natives were actually so insolent, publicly taking liberties with Qi Menghan. Who could tolerate this? The problem was, which one of them could defeat Hua Yuchang? There was none. If there wasn't anyone, they could only shut their mouths obediently. In the cultivation world, strength was everything. If they didn't have strength, they could only obediently take a beating. Little Han, it's time for you to show off. The large black dog egged him on. The little azure dragon also nodded. Originally, Grandpa Dragon wouldn't have given such a good chance to you. But no matter how I look at it, Grandpa Dragon feels that the relations between you and that imperial clan woman are unclear. Thus, I will reluctantly let you have this chance to save the damsel in distress. Remember, you owe Grandpa Dragon a debt. Get lost. Ling Han sent the little azure dragon flying with a kick. What nonsense were you spouting? That brat. Before Ling Han could fly into a rage, the natives in the vicinity could no longer hold themselves back. Their second strongest elite had already beaten the outsider into submission, which naturally represented their complete victory. Now it was time to settle the score with Ling Han. He actually dared to kill one of their own. Humph, he was seeking death. Let me spar with you. A sturdy man rushed over and threw a punch at Ling Han. His power was incomparably deep, and when his fist shot over, a strong wind whistled. Ling Han didn't dodge. Only when the other approached did he move. He also threw a punch to greet the other's fist. Pong! The two fists crashed into each other, and instantly, a shockwave that was visible to the naked eye spread out. There was also light bursting forth like lightning. Ha! To dare compete with Ouyang Ling in fists. Where did this brat get his confidence from? Ouyang is the elite ranked 13th. It's said that his iron fists have been tempered in the flames of heaven. With a single punch, he can even shatter divine metal. Heh! Just wait and see this brat's bones shatter one by one. The natives all laughed loudly. An outsider that cultivated mystical power actually dared to fight them head-on at close quarters? Where did he get such courage from? However, amidst loud laughter, Ouyang Ling's expression suddenly changed. A large amount of cold sweat seeped out from his skin, as if a water sluice had been opened. Then, his face twisted, and his mouth opened, releasing an earth-shattering scream. Ah! It was long and drawn out, and did not end. Only now did everyone see clearly. They could see that Ouyang Ling's whole right arm was oozing blood, and there were even white bone spikes protruding from some places, looking extremely terrifying. This Ouyang Ling's entire right arm had actually been shattered. The natives were all astounded. Just now, they had still been mocking Ling Han for his stupidity. He actually dared to engage in close-quarter combat with them. This was practically courting death. But reality had proven that Ling Han was not brainless, but rather that his physique was stronger. With a single punch, he had crippled Ouyang Ling's entire arm. Fuck, who exactly was the body arts user here? At this moment, the natives were completely silent, and the atmosphere was oppressive to the extreme. On the other hand, the outsiders suddenly erupted in enthusiastic cheers, causing the mountains to reverberate. This was too inspiring. As expected of the Imperial Sun Killer. Impressive. We should have let Ling Han fight long ago, and let these country bumpkins know how awesome we are. Let's go. Let's go. Let's start a massacre. Amidst such cheers, Hua Youchang's eyes swept over, bursting with divine light, as sharp as a sharp blade. Interesting. He smacked his lips, and with a sudden leap, charged towards Ling Han. Come battle. Boom, he threw a punch. Ling Han didn't use his mystical power. Instead, he unleashed the might of his body art and exchanged a punch with his opponent. Pong! The two iron fists crashed together, and waves of power surged out, turning into ripples that spread out in all directions. Even if they were all prodigies here, they still felt pressure, and couldn't help but retreat continuously. Hua Youchang's expression changed drastically, and he couldn't help but stumble back a few steps. Only then did he regain his balance. He couldn't help but feel shocked. His power was already at 35 heavens, yet he was actually no match for Ling Han. Just how strong was this guy? Good. Seeing this scene, the outsiders all cheered, incredibly excited. Meanwhile, the natives remained silent. They were indeed outmatched. Hua Youchang quickly regained his confidence. He bared his teeth and revealed a smile. I never thought that there would actually be people who cultivate the body art outside. Ling Han smiled faintly. Thankfully, he had also made a trip to the True Dragon Abyss and had obtained the Heavenly Dragon Emperor technique. Otherwise, he would only be 38 heavens in mystical power now, and though he would still suppress Heavenly Emperor, it would not be as easily as he was doing it now. I'm just average, he said modestly. Show off. The large black dog and little azure dragon spat at the same time. Hua Youchang was proud, and he said, your mystical power shouldn't be weak either. Thus, combined with body art, your power is superior to mine. However, in terms of a single power, you're definitely no match for me. So, I'll let you see just how terrifyingly powerful a power will be after pushing it to the pinnacle level. Everyone gave an oh. No wonder Ling Han's power was so strong. As it turned out, he was cultivating both mystical power and body art. Meanwhile, Su Jie and the other imperial sons all wore ugly expressions. The requirement for body arts was too high, and it was extremely exhausting of resources. Thus, even with the wealth of the imperial clan, they could only allow one clansman to practice body arts at any one time. This opportunity belonged to the Golden Generation. Though they were also imperial sons, they had no chance of obtaining body arts. That's right. With the imperial clan's power, it would be no problem for them to push the body arts of several clansmen to the level of the core formation tier at the same time. In fact, it would not be difficult for them to reach the level of sect master in body art, but the problem was, even if they reached the level of sect master in body art, what use would it be? The requirements of the imperial clan were too high. Thus, all resources were focused on a certain imperial son, enough to allow him to cultivate body art to the pinnacle level even after becoming a saint, and truly become invincible among his peers. Su Jie and the others also wanted body arts. This could increase their battle prowess, but they could only rely on themselves to obtain resources. This naturally was far from being able to keep up with their cultivation levels. It was practically equivalent to not having cultivated body arts. Now that they saw a guy that came from a humble background, who actually also cultivated body art, surpassing them, how could they not be envious, jealous, and hateful? From this aspect, the Heavenly Dragon Emperor technique was truly awesome. Of course, cultivating this cultivation technique required one to have the true dragon bloodline, and who knew how many people would be refused entry with just this requirement. Hua Youchang's body trembled, and multiple muscles popped out. He was filled with power, and mysterious seals could vaguely be seen circulating on his skin. He crouched down, then suddenly shot out, pouncing towards Ling Han. Body arts were very simple. What one cultivated was the physical body, possessing endless power and a frightening physique. There were no illusory moves like celestial techniques. Oneself was a weapon, capable of flattening everything. Hua Yuchang turned himself into a human-shaped spirit tool, which crashed towards Ling Han. Simple, rough, and direct. Ling Han smiled. He also liked this kind of battle style as it could quickly end the battle. He also exerted force with his feet, greeting Hua Youchang's attack. Pong! The two of them crashed into each other, and instantly, a mushroom-like ball of energy rose up from the ground, spreading out towards the skies and the surroundings. This was too terrifying. This energy was filled with destructive power, and even an imperial sun would frown at this. Everyone hurriedly ran backwards. It was too dangerous. These two guys were both freaks. After running for a long distance, they finally stopped and turned around to look. With such a head-on clash, the victor would probably be decided in a few moves. The ball of energy was slowly dispersing, and Ling Han was seen standing there completely unscathed. Meanwhile, Hua Yuchang had stretched out his arms and legs, lying in the Chinese character for big. No way! Everyone was stunned. Just now, Hua Yuchang had spoken so confidently, looking like he could defeat Ling Han. But in the end, he had lost in a single collision. He had definitely lost. This time, he was definitely not drunk on tea. The natives were all as if they had lost both their parents. Their second strongest elite had actually lost, and he had lost in such a clean and decisive manner at that. Lord Ling is mighty. Lord Ling is so domineering. Meanwhile, the outsiders were smug and extremely excited. He had won. Ling Han smiled faintly and searched among the natives. In the end, he located a lanky man. Yi Qianhong, do you dare battle me? Since he had already defeated the second elite, he would definitely go with the flow and defeat the top elite as well, to prevent others from jumping around and chattering endlessly afterwards. Why was he staring at that man? Firstly, this person was in the camp of the natives, and secondly, he was also the only person who had maintained his composure all this while. There was a 99% chance that he was the number one prodigy of the natives, Yi Qianhong. As expected, the lanky man put down his teacup and turned to look at Ling Han. Lord Yi! Someone half-knelt. Lord Yi! Even more natives half-knelt, their faces filled with reverence. Lord Yi, please battle! They all called out, as if they were welcoming a god. The corners of Ling Han's mouth twitched slightly. Why did these natives like to play this kind of trick? They would kneel down at the slightest provocation to create an atmosphere. Yi Qianhong finally stood up. His expression was calm, and he simply looked at Ling Han. I'm not gay, so please don't look at me with such deep affection. Ling Han waved his hand dismissively. Anger instantly appeared on Yi Qianhong's face, and he said, Are you seeking death? Hee. I'm already tired of hearing such words. Let's change to something more meaningful. Ling Han said with a chuckle. All right, I'll oblige you. Yi Qianhong strode towards Ling Han. Boom! All the power in his body burst forth, turning into flames that were boiling and throbbing. His aura was astonishingly terrifying. Even the expressions of the imperial sons like Zhang Fong and imperial daughters like Qi Menghan changed drastically at this moment. This guy was too terrifying. His abilities were definitely heaven-defyingly powerful. Your strength is not too bad, so I have decided to subdue you in 3 moves. In future, you will become my servant, Yi Qianhong said. He was already close enough and shot out a punch. Ling Han naturally wouldn't cower, brandishing his fists in response. Pong! In this exchange of blows, Ling Han's figure immediately slid back. His feet scraped over the ground, forcefully creating a deep groove that was as long as over 30 meters. It should be known that this was the mountain sea heaven. The structure of the ground was incredibly sturdy, which showed how terrifying the power of Xianxia's punch was. What? Seeing this scene, the outsiders all felt their scalps go numb. Ling Han was already so strong, yet he was still no match for Xianxia. Just how strong was this guy? Meanwhile, the natives cheered to their heart's content. This was their #1 prodigy, capable of insta-killing everything in his way. Xianxia casually retracted his fist, saying, "I forgot to tell you. I also cultivated body art and mystical power at the same time. Moreover, when I was at the cauldron forging tier, I completed the 9 cauldrons fusion cauldron in a natural desolate land. Thus, my mystical power has reached 36 heavens, and my body art is also at 36 heavens. Combined with the two, my raw power has reached 42 heavens." Hiss, everyone inhaled sharply. The 9 cauldrons fusion cauldron was the standard trait of the Imperial Son and Imperial Daughter. Without reaching this level, even the Imperial Son and Imperial Daughter would be stripped of their status. However, if one wanted to become an emperor, they would have to rely on their own power to fuse the 9 cauldrons into one. This was also one of the reasons why the imperial clans could no longer produce an ancestral king. But now, a native had actually relied on the help of the power of heaven and earth to complete the fusion of the 9 cauldrons. What kind of concept was this? This person had hopes of becoming an emperor. Moreover, the body art and mystical power had fused together, surpassing the power of 40 heavens. This suppressed even the ancestral kings of the past. This was truly heaven-defying. It's not that terrifying. The great emperors all came from long ago and lack resources and cultivation techniques, so they don't cultivate body arts. Otherwise, it would be completely no issue for them to surpass 40 heavens in power. That's right. It is said that when some ancestral king were young, their raw power was as high as 38 or even 39 heavens, which is much higher than this native. To say nothing of others, just take Golden Generation for example. All of them have cultivated body arts, so their power is definitely not inferior to his. That's right. If it was not for the fact that they have the potential to surpass the generations of ancestral kings, how could these people be worthy of being called the Golden Generation? Everyone sighed ruefully. None of them were willing to admit it, but they all agreed internally that Xianxia should be the strongest in the current core formation tier. Even Ling Han would not be able to match him. "Being my servant, there is no need to feel aggrieved," Xianxia said calmly, as he strolled slowly towards Ling Han. "I am someone who is going to become the ancestral king. Being able to become my servant, your name will definitely be known for all eternity. In this lifetime, what one pursues is nothing more than this." These words caused a great many people to humph. You are only the #1 in the core formation tier, but don't forget, there was still the Golden Generation. Xianxia had already arrived in front of Ling Han. He stretched out a hand to grab Ling Han, wanting to beat this person into submission. "Servant your sister." Ling Han roared loudly and also grabbed out at Xianxia. "Fuck! I only activated body art, and you're only able to suppress me by 30% in terms of power. What are you so smug about? Stubborn." Xianxia sneered and grabbed at Ling Han's wrist. The two of them engaged in close-quarter combat, and it was natural that whoever was more powerful would emerge victorious. Xianxia's expression changed drastically as soon as he placed his hand on his. Holy fuck! How is this power so powerful? He had not even finished the thought when he was already brandished by Ling Han. Pung! He crashed heavily onto the ground. Pung! In the next second, he was once again swung around, turning 180 degrees in the air, and crashed onto the ground with the other side of his body. Pung, pung, pung. Ling Han used Xianxia like a punching bag and tossed him around madly. Fuck! Seeing this scene, everyone was dumbfounded. Wasn't it agreed that he would be the strongest in the core formation tier? What was going on now? Why was he being smashed madly like a dead dog? Have we seen wrongly? No, it's not blurred vision. Xianxia is really being madly smashed by Ling Han. Heavens! Didn't Yi Qianhong's power surpass 40 heavens? This is a threshold that the imperial sons couldn't cross even if they burned their imperial blood. And now, he is actually being trampled on like this. Ling Han is too strong. He is truly the imperial sun killer. This is practically torturing noobs. After a moment of shock, everyone finally came back to their senses. Then, there was another question. Just how strong was Ling Han? Yi Qianhong's power is at 42 heavens, so Ling Han's power definitely surpasses his. To be able to crush him so easily, he would have to be suppressed by 3 heavens in power at least. Fuck. 45 heavens? Thinking of such a terrifying number, everyone was stunned speechless. Was this a height that living beings could reach? Pung pung pung. Ling Han was still throwing him around. Fuck, he actually dared to make him his servant. He must be blind. The large black dog stroked his paws and praised. Little Han is really a show-off. What do you mean? The little azure dragon humbly learnt. You see, little Han deliberately pretended to be weak first, allowing the E-brat to taste some benefits. He talked to himself and revealed all his strength, drawing the exclamations of shock from the masses, who admitted their own inferiority. But it was at this moment that little Han suddenly smashed the E-brat as if he was a weakling. With such a strong contrast, how could it not shock the whole area? The large black dog praised repeatedly. Oh, so this is what it means to suppress one's desires first, and then soar. The little azure dragon finally understood. Raise the enemy high, then thrash him easily. You're worthy of teaching, the large black dog said with a nod. He then looked around and said, Oh, that's right. Which of you said that you wanted to challenge little Han? Challenge your sister. All the natives looked at Ling Han, who was madly smashing Yi Qianhong, and swallowed with great difficulty. They all shook their heads. If it were them, they would definitely be smashed into a pancake in a few moves. Ling Han smashed for a while longer and felt bored. Then he casually tossed Yi Qianhong aside and walked back on his own. There was complete silence. Without seeing Yi Qianhong sprawled out on the ground like a dead dog, everyone had the illusion that this guy would counterattack. After all, he was a monster whose power had broken through 40 heavens. But even until the end, it was still so peaceful. A freakish genius whose power had exceeded 40 heavens had been defeated just like that. This was practically a humiliation that could be nailed onto the pillar of shame. How could they accept this? To say nothing of the natives, even the outsiders had lost their excitement. Ling Han was too strong, so strong that they could only look up to him but could not catch up to him. To those who aspired to pursue the throne, this was practically a great blow. How could they win against such a freak? They hadn't been born at the same time as the golden generation, avoiding the terror of being ruled by those prodigies. Now, however, Ling Han had suddenly appeared. His freakishness was in no way inferior to them, or perhaps even surpassed them. This was simply enough to drive them to despair. Fighting spirit, would they still have fighting spirit in future? Everyone's hearts were filled with ups and downs. Only with competition would there be vigor, but Ling Han was so strong that others didn't even have the right to compete. Don't take it to heart. Ling Han only cultivated body art at the same time, and that's why his power is so strong. Someone forcibly boosted his confidence. That's right. As long as one advances into the true self tier, the advantage of body art will be greatly decreased, and the further one advances into the late stage, the less useful it would be. Even if I am no match now, it doesn't mean that I won't be a match in the future. The imperial sons cheered each other on, barely regaining some of their confidence. But they knew that things were not as simple as they said. If body art was useless, why would the various imperial clans have to exert all their power to support a single imperial son? This was very important, very important. Qi Minghan's beautiful eyes lit up. She knew that Ling Han was extraordinary, but she hadn't expected him to be this powerful. Sister, if you don't hurry up and make your move, brother-in-law will really slip away. The silver-haired Lolita suddenly appeared and whispered into her ear. Qi Menghan shot her a fierce look, but her heart couldn't help but skip a beat. The banquet had already progressed to this point, and no one was still in the mood to discuss Dao. The strongest had already appeared, so what difference did the others have with a clown should they continue? It wasn't long before people left one after another. More and more people left, and Qi Menghan simply announced the end of the banquet. In any case, the purpose of the banquet had already been achieved, and that was to have the natives behave themselves and show off the might of the imperial clan. Though the results were slightly off, the natives would definitely behave much more obediently after this matter. After returning to the encampment, Ling Han couldn't help but feel rueful. He was only focused on venting his anger, and seemed to have used too much force, causing himself to stand at the cusp of the storm. Have I been too showy recently? He reflected on himself. And I have to keep a low profile in future. That would be more in line with my character. The large black dog and little azure dragon heard his muttering, and couldn't help but roll their eyes. You are a showy person, they said at the same time. Ling Han continued to advance his cultivation level, while the large black dog and little azure dragon were responsible for finding the clues left behind by the descending Heaven Holy Emperor. They didn't believe that they couldn't find it. Time passed quietly, and occasionally, news of an imperial sun breaking through to the true self tier would be revealed. Now, the youngest generation of imperial suns had more or less leaped over the threshold of the true self tier. This place was too suitable for cultivation, and only when they reached the true self tier would they be able to maximize their gains. Thus, the imperial suns who had long since cultivated the core formation tier to the consummate level naturally had nothing to be reluctant about. Ling Han's improvement was also very gratifying. In this 1 year, he had cultivated both mystical power and physical power to the height of 40 heavens. What kind of concept was this? To say nothing of 2 powers reaching 40 heavens, even one reaching 40 heavens was as difficult as ascending the heavens. Take mystical power, for example. Why had Ling Han been able to cultivate to 40 heavens? The prerequisite was that he had fused 10 cauldrons into one. However, could there be a second person in the world that could reach this kind of height? Then, there was physical power. Though this had been passed down from the line of the true dragon, but even if he was the son of true dragon, the little azure dragon had just barely reached 38 heavens. Why couldn't the little azure dragon reach 40 heavens? This was because Ling Han's body was tempered by 4 stars high-level energy, while the little azure dragon's body was tempered by 3 stars. The difference lay here. Couldn't be helped. Who asked Ling Han to have mastered the 10-star destructive energy? Ling Han's achievements were definitely unprecedented, and would never be replicated in the future. Moreover, the combined might of 2 powers of 40 heavens could allow Ling Han's power to soar to 50 heavens. What kind of concept was this? 45 heavens was the barrier between the core formation tier and the true self tier. When power broke through to 45 heavens, it would actually be equivalent to reaching the height of the first heaven of the true self tier. For Ling Han, his current power could already suppress some cultivators who had just entered the true self tier. The true self tier 4 forms corresponded to the early stage of the true self tier, the middle stage of the true self tier, the late stage of the true self tier, and the consummate level of the true self tier. The early stage of the true self tier only had the power of 3 heavens, and Ling Han had already reached this kind of height. Of course, when a true self-tier cultivator began to cultivate regulations, the power of Great Tao was also a part of battle prowess that couldn't be overlooked. Thus, Ling Han's power could rival the early stage of the true self-tier, but if he just fought head-on like that, his chances of winning were practically 0. However, he also possessed various high-level energies, which could boost Ling Han's astonishing destructive power and truly allow him to stand against true self-tier elites. Now, there's 90% chance that the early stage of the true self-tier is no match for me. Unfortunately, Ling Han had used alchemical pills to rapidly rush up to this cultivation level. Thus, there was a situation where his foundations were unstable, and he needed some time to stabilize them. The large black dog and little azure dragon were also stabilizing their cultivation level. Breaking through was only a matter of time, and definitely not too long. Instead, it was the Empress and Hunyo. They had accumulated power for a long time, and had broken through to the core formation tier in a single stroke. Once again, they maintained the same cultivation level as Ling Han. Of course, Ling Han would soon be able to break through to the true self tier, and the gap between the three of them would once again widen. A considerable number of Imperial clan elites extended an olive branch to Ling Han, wanting to take Ling Han as their son-in-law, but Ling Han naturally refused. Firstly, Ling Han didn't have such thoughts at all, and secondly, these Imperial clans still hadn't changed their lofty attitudes, thinking that taking Ling Han as a live-in son-in-law was a charity for him. After all, becoming an emperor was much, much too difficult. Though Ling Han was presently showing signs of being invincible among his peers, he still had the golden generation above him. Furthermore, the imperial path was arduous, and who knew how many prodigies had collapsed on their way here. Now, just to say that Ling Han would have the last laugh? What a joke. Perhaps even the entire golden generation would be wiped out. The heaven and earth were already prepared to welcome a new emperor, but in terms of time, it may be several hundred years later, tens of thousands of years later, or even millions of years later. The imperial clans had always enjoyed a lofty status. They had taken a fancy to Ling Han's potential, and thus they had already given him a very, very high opinion of him by taking him as a live-in son-in-law. Ling Han refused. Being thought of the imperial clans as not knowing what was good for him also cast a haze over his future. He had already offended the Fire Cloud imperial clan, and now he had drawn the animosity of two great imperial clans. It was already a question of how long Ling Han could live, so how could he talk of becoming an emperor? All of this naturally wouldn't affect Ling Han. He was still cultivating every day, stabilizing his cultivation level, and looking forward to taking the next step. Right at this moment, a major event happened in the Mountain Sea heaven. A statue in the city suddenly collapsed, revealing a deep hole. This attracted the curiosity of a great many people. It should be known that it was very possible that the secret of the Needless Mountains was hidden here. Could it be that this secret was inside the cave? Instantly, a great many people entered the cave to investigate. Even Venerate tier elites were alerted, and entered the cave one after another. Ling Han had initially wanted to go as well, but the Venerate tier elites had all moved out, so he naturally gave up on this idea. Even if there were clues inside, so what? The Venerate tier elites had already moved out, so did the others have a share? However, very soon there was feedback. The bottom of this deep cave was actually an entrance that had been sealed. However, this seal was already severely damaged, and a gap had appeared. It could allow living beings with low cultivation levels to pass through. There were already quite a few Cauldron Forging tier and Core Formation tier youngsters who had entered, but up until now, not one of them had come out. As time passed, this even alerted the Saints. Who wouldn't be interested in the Imperial Scroll? However, after studying it for a while, the Saints came to an astonishing conclusion. That was, this seal had been created by the Great Emperor. Was it the descending Heaven Holy Emperor? This was a very natural association. This planet had been forcefully compressed from a sun by the descending Heaven Holy Emperor. It had also once been his temporary residence during his battle expeditions. Now that a great emperor-level seal had appeared here, who else could it be but the hand of the descending Heaven Holy Emperor? Then was the secret of Needless Mountains really hidden here? Though this seal was severely damaged, it had been created by the great emperor after all. Even the saint could not break it. Thus, all the great elites could only send out the younger generation to fight over it. All of a sudden, all the cultivators below the spirit transformation tier were mobilized. That's right. The true self-tier elite was the upper limit of entry through the seal. If the spirit transformation tiers went, they wouldn't be able to advance the slightest bit. Ling Han naturally moved out as well. He had the Empress, Hunyo, the large black dog, the little azure dragon, and Lin Luo by his side. This lineup could be considered luxurious among core formation tiers, but added with true self-tier, it couldn't be considered powerful at all. And just like that, they set out. The great elites reached an agreement, allowing young people from all sides to enter the cave. The treasures they obtained would also belong to each individual. However, if it involved the secrets of Needless Mountains, they had to share it. Otherwise, with a saint standing guard and even wielding an imperial weapon, who would be able to pass? Ling Han's small team arrived at the bottom of the cave. It was extremely dark here, and the gravity field was even more terrifying. The foundation-building tier cultivators couldn't block it at all, and their protective shields were directly shattered. Thus, foundation-building cultivators couldn't enter the cave. At least, only those at Cauldron Forging tier could barely maintain the existence of the shield. Otherwise, if one were to face it head-on with their physical body, they could only sprawl out on the ground. Thankfully, the Empress and Hunyo had also advanced into the core formation tier, and were also slightly accomplished in body art. Walking here was not as easy as walking on flat ground, but it was not all that difficult either. After walking for a long time, they finally arrived at the place where the seal was placed. Actually, this was a great door. It was incredibly ancient, and the door was covered densely with seals that were interwoven into sheets. However, this door was damaged, revealing a hole that was big enough for two people to pass through side by side. But if one looked inside, they could only see a stretch of primal chaos. Hurry up! Don't delay others! Ling Han was still studying it when he heard a urging voice from behind him. Hunyo immediately turned around, bared her teeth and said, "You dare to be fierce to Nyo's Ling Han? So what?" The person said proudly. Because Hunyo hadn't revealed her true appearance, he naturally wouldn't be affected by her exquisite beauty. However, the person beside him immediately tugged at his clothes and whispered, "That's Ling Han! It's Ling Han." The person from before immediately shut up and even took a few steps back. What he meant was, "You can study it however you like, no problem." The strongest person in their group was only in the core formation tier. Even if they teamed up, they would still be no match for Ling Han, so how could they be qualified to challenge him? Ling Han, Lin Luo, and the large black dog were all observing. This was appraised by the saint, and it was a great emperor-level seal. If they could comprehend a sliver of its profound secrets, the benefits would be boundless. Unfortunately, this was too mysterious. It was like they were reading a mysterious book, and they did not have the slightest idea. This was more logical. If the core formation tier cultivator could comprehend the profound meaning of the great emperor tier, then the level of cultivation would have to be rewritten. Thus, after studying it for a while, everyone gave up. "Let's go," they said. The group entered the hole one after another. Ling Han led the way, while the little azure dragon trailed at the back. The two of them were the strongest contestants in the team. So cold. Even with Ling Han's physique, he immediately felt an extraordinary chill assault him upon entering, as if it was going to freeze him. This was very illogical. It should be known that Ling Han's present physique could be considered incredibly tough. He was like a human-shaped celestial tool, and would actually be frozen to the point that even his blood seemed to have frozen. This was naturally bizarre. Furthermore, Ling Han's eyes swept over the surroundings, and saw that there were corpses lying all around him, or even in fact beneath his feet. Though he did not recognize them, from the traces of the corpses, they should be those who had entered into this place not too long ago, yet had frozen to death. They were all Cauldron Forging tiers. Because there were really too many of them, this place had become like a mass grave. Ling Han suddenly turned around, yet shockingly discovered that there was no great door behind him. It was completely empty. Was this a one-way transference portal? Or was it because the door wasn't completely open, so the door didn't appear at this location? It was all possible. Just as he was pondering, a second person had already entered. Nyo's freezing to death. Hunyo immediately crossed her arms over her chest, her delicate body trembling. She had just broken through to the core formation tier, and although she was much stronger than the Cauldron Forging tier, so she wouldn't freeze to death here, the extreme cold still made her face pale. Ling Han hurriedly pulled his beautiful wife into his arms, and opened the starlight screen to resist the cold. However, this did not have much effect. This coldness ignored his physique, and also ignored the starlight screen, as it directly attacked his body. With a thought, Ling Han switched to burning the heavenly Tao flames. This time, the effect was instantaneous. The coldness instantly disappeared like the ebbing tide. "Wu, Ling Han, you're so warm." Hunyo spread out her arms and legs, wrapping around Ling Han like an octopus. With a flash, the Empress arrived. Of course, she was also cold, but only shivered slightly. Then, from her nose, she released an indistinct moan. The aloof and proud empress was indeed completely different from Hun Yo. Ling Han did not say another word, and pulled this beautiful wife into his arms as well, taking her under the protection of the heavenly Tao flames. Then the large black dog, Lin Luo, and little azure dragon entered one after another. Fuck! What the hell? Grandpa Dog is about to be frozen into a dog. The large black dog immediately wailed in agony. Aren't you a dog? Hun Yo giggled. It's too cold. Grandpa Dog's brain has short-circuited. The large black dog stuck out its tongue, but when it discovered that its tongue was showing signs of freezing, it hurriedly shrunk back in. Lin Luo merely frowned. As one of the strongest heavenly venerable tier elites of Genesis world, he naturally wouldn't change his expression even if the sky collapsed. Meanwhile, the little azure dragon howled like the large black dog. His physique actually couldn't block the coldness. This was too strange. Next, the few people that had been following Ling Han entered one after another. There were two among them that were cauldron-forging tiers. The moment they entered, they were enveloped in a layer of white frost. Then, with a bang, they collapsed onto the ground, eternally accompanying the corpses around them. It was too cold, and normal cauldron-forging tiers couldn't block it at all. Ling Han frowned. There is no way out here. Even if we wanted to send the news back, we would not be able to. Little Han, it's too cold here. If we stay here for too long, we'll all be in danger, the large black dog said. Ling Han and Lin Luo nodded. In this place, they could only rely on high-level energy to resist the cold, and high-level energy could be communicated through spiritual power, so there would naturally be a time when it would be exhausted. If that time came, how would they resist the cold? No matter what, let's find the exit first, or which place isn't so cold to solve the problem of survival, and then consider other things. All right. They advanced, and there were still 4 people left in the team that had entered behind them. They hurriedly followed Ling Han and the others. This could greatly increase their chances of survival. What exactly is this place? The large black dog asked curiously. Ling Han also wanted to know. His physique was actually useless, and his mystical power was also useless. Even he couldn't block the coldness. Was there such a strange place in this world? Could it be that this was set up by the great emperor? The large black dog guessed. If it was a great emperor's power, causing his physique and mystical power to be ineffective, this naturally would be a piece of cake. If this is the doing of a great emperor, then why can the lowest star-level high-level energy resist the cold? Ling Han had already tried it out. Even if he used 1 star of high-level energy, he would still be able to resist the cold. The large black dog also felt that this didn't make sense. Holy fuck! What the hell is this place? The group walked for a very long time, and suddenly, a pillar of blazing flames shot up into the skies ahead of them. Everyone exchanged looks, and hurriedly quickened their pace, heading towards that direction. Ling Han and the others didn't walk far before arriving near the pile of flames. They weren't the first batch of people to enter, so they weren't the first to discover the bonfire either. There were already many people gathered here. However, when Ling Han and the others discovered the ingredients used to burn the bonfire, they couldn't help but feel greatly shocked. It was actually an arm. Its length was around 300 meters, and only its bones were left behind. It was the bones that were burning, releasing azure flames, illuminating the skies. This place was too dark, and the skies were completely gray. There was no sun or moon or stars, as if it was eternal chaos. After arriving here, they could clearly feel that the coldness had been dispersed considerably. No wonder there were so many people gathered here. This was a supply station for life. Ling Han could see very clearly. Those bones were covered densely with seals, and amidst the burning green flames, there was also multicolored light formed from regulations. To be able to refine regulations into one's body, this was the body of a saint. Fuck, what kind of place was this? A saint had actually lost an arm? No wonder they didn't dare to get too close, even though they were trying to keep warm. That was the corpse of a saint, and it possessed a terrifying might. If they got too close, they would be crushed to death. Haha, Ling Han. A cold laugh rang out, and Su Jie flew over from beside the bonfire like a bird. This guy had already broken through to the true self tier, and was exuding a completely different aura. Ling Han smiled calmly. What can I do for you? I'll spar with you. Su Jie directly charged over, the killing intent on his face undisguised. Though he did not remember what had happened in the True Dragon Abyss, he had not obtained the True Dragon of Fortune, and Ling Han had obtained it. This clearly meant one thing, and that was he had not won over Ling Han. No one had seen this before, and even if they had, they would definitely not remember it. However, everyone knew this kind of deduction. Thus, he naturally hated Ling Han. Furthermore, now that Ling Han had made a name for himself, suppressing all imperial sons like them, and could even challenge the Golden Generation, how could Su Jie not feel jealous? He had already broken through to the true self tier, and Ling Han hadn't. Thus, this was the best chance to kill Ling Han. There was no need to make a move directly. He only had to chase him out of the vicinity of the bonfire, and he would be frozen to death. Ling Han frowned. He was a smart person, so he had naturally guessed Su Jie's thoughts. However, even though he could guess it, Su Jie had already advanced into the true self tier. This was also the truth, and was very troublesome to deal with. But now that he was being bullied, if he did not counterattack, this was not Ling Han's style either. Fine, he would just have to see how powerful the Imperial Sun would be once he advanced into the true self tier. He immediately clenched his hand into a fist and swung it at Su Jie. At this moment he held nothing back. The mystical power and body art burst forth at the same time, unleashing power that was comparable to the third heaven of the true self tier. Pong! The two of them exchanged a blow. Ling Han's figure swayed, and Su Jie also trembled. The two sides actually tied. Holy fuck! At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded. It should be known that Su Jie was a true self-tier elite, and furthermore, he was the Imperial Sun. Thus, even if he had just stepped into this cultivation level, his power was at least comparable to the peak stage of the first form of the true self-tier. However, Ling Han could fight him to a tie. Was he dreaming? Su Jie himself was dumbfounded. He swore that he had definitely not held back the slightest bit of power in this blow. The power of the third heaven of the true self-tier had completely burst out, but he had actually only tied with Ling Han. This guy was too freakish, wasn't he? You are only a fucking core formation tier. Who would have thought? Your body art and mystical power cultivation can actually reach this level. Su Jie humphed and continued. So, it's even more important that I don't let you live. Boom! He threw another punch. Ling Han brandished his fists to parry and said calmly, the so-called true self-tier is only so. Ha, do you think that in the true self-tier power is only stronger? Su Jie sneered. Now, I'll let you see the true power of the true self-tier and the terrifying aspect of the Imperial clan. Only when one reaches this cultivation level would they be able to unleash their full power. He channeled the Imperial technique, extracting the regulations of heaven and earth to boost himself, so that he could explode with tons of destructive power. However, he had just raised his hand, when his mouth immediately gaped, revealing an expression of disbelief. What was going on? Was this some kind of strategy? Ling Han did not care. He leaped forwards. Boom, the heavenly Tao flames combusted. He used the god-slaying technique, and launched a fierce offensive at Su Jie. Su Jie hurriedly parried. Pong, pong, pong. The two sides battled fiercely, and it was still a stalemate. This stunned everyone, especially those who had just broken through to the true self-tier. They clearly knew how terrifyingly powerful their abilities would be after advancing into this cultivation level. Yet Su Jie had still managed to battle Ling Han to a tie. This was far too illogical. Su Jie is deliberately going easy on him? Impossible. He has been humiliated by Ling Han before, and he has been suppressed for so long. Now that he has turned the tables on his cultivation level, there is definitely no reason for him to miss out on this opportunity. Then what's going on? All of a sudden, a thought flashed through one of the Imperial Sun's minds, and he said, "You guys try channeling the Imperial technique. What do you want? I told you to give it a try, so go ahead," the Imperial Sun said. He channeled the imperial technique first. The others did the same. Then their expressions changed drastically. No wonder. In this place, we actually can't mobilize the regulations of heaven and earth. Then, the advantage of the true self tier can't be used at all. Gasp! It's as if heaven and earth's regulations don't exist here at all. Everyone cried out one after another. They finally understood why Sujie was unable to suppress Ling Han. That was because in this place, there was absolutely no fucking way to draw on the regulations of heaven and earth. Compared to the core formation tier, the true self tier only had an advantage in power, but in terms of power, Ling Han was not the slightest bit inferior. Thus, Ling Han was able to fight Sujie to a tie. What the hell is this place? Everyone exclaimed in shock. Even the Imperial Sons were anxious because in this place, it was very possible that their trump cards would be rendered ineffective. For example, the Substitution Seal and 10,000-Mile Escape Talisman could only take effect by depending on the regulations of heaven and earth. Though Ling Han was battling fiercely, his ears were sharp, and he had also heard the discussions of these Imperial Sons and Imperial Daughters. Realization dawned on him. No wonder Sujie's battle prowess was far below his imagination. As it turned out, he could not use the regulations of heaven and earth. Then I won't be reserved. Ling Han unleashed his might, each strike fierce and domineering. His physique was tough, and though he was no match for the coldness of this place, he could still be effective against Sujie's attacks. The battle prowess of the two of them were similar, but one was unafraid of attack, while the other had to defend with all his might. How could they be the same? As the battle continued, Sujie was completely at a disadvantage. Sujie's depression and frustration could be imagined. He should have been able to easily crush Ling Han, but after he made his move, he realized that the heavens were actually screwing him over. Was this the benefit of obtaining the true dragon of fortune? He had no choice but to retreat. Otherwise, he would suffer. Ling Han set off in pursuit. If others wanted to bully him, there was nothing much to say. He would beat them up and kill them.